Good morning. We will call the July 18th, 2022 work session to order. We're going to start out with one of the most exciting things we ever do, which is the swearing in of new officers. So if I could have Jonathan Mitchell, Owen Reich, Joelle Nina, Michelle Perry, Monica Zwavkop, Jacob Walser, Jarrett Forstel, David Seacrest, and David Kidd come forward for the swearing in. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning, Mayor and Council and City Manager. Chief Dan Slaughter with the Police Department. I'd like to introduce you to our next new nine, as you mentioned their names, but Jarrett Forstel is graduated from the Eastport South Manor High School in 2015, and he has served as a police officer with the Winston-Salem Police Department, North Carolina, from 2017 to 2022 before coming to the Clearwater Police Department. David Kidd graduated from Gaither High School and attended Hillsborough Community College. He served as an active and a reserve duty with the Marine Corps and also was in the automotive industry. Jonathan Mitchell earned his bachelor's degree in 2021 from the University of South Florida, and we are acquiring him straight out of college pretty much. Joelle Nina graduated from Dover High School and the St. Petersburg College Law Enforcement Academy, and he also served the United States Marine Corps from 2013 to 2021. Michelle Perry graduated from C.J. Ellison High School in Texas and earned her associate's degree from the American Intercontinental University in 2018, and she served in the United States Army and the United States Army Reserve. Owen graduated from Pinellas Park High School and St. Petersburg College Law Enforcement Academy, and Owen Reich has been employed with us as a telecommunicator since 2020. David Seacrest graduated from Home Education Program High School in Colorado and attended Chambers College. He served as a police officer with the Denver Police Department from 2018 to 2022 before relocating to Clearwater. And Monica Zweiskop, that's how you got it, Zweiskop, she graduated from John Jay College of Criminal Justice with a bachelor's degree, and she served as a police officer with the New York Police Department from 2019 to 2022 before coming to Clearwater. And the last name, pretty familiar to many, is Jacob Walser. Jacob graduated Clearwater High School in 2017 and graduated from the Hillsborough Community Police Academy at the top of his class. He has worked with the police aide with the Clearwater Police Department since 2018, and his father is a retired Clearwater police officer. More than happy to ask you, Mayor, to go ahead and direct the clerk to swear them in.
And if there's any family members that would like to take a photo from this side, you're welcome to come back. I'm now going to turn it over to Rosemarie Call, our city clerk, to do the swearing in.
Come on back here. Come all the way back.
I state your name.
I, Jacob Walser,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, protect, and defend
that I will support, protect, and defend
the Constitution and government
the Constitution and government
of the United States
of the United States
and of the state of Florida
and of the state of Florida
and the charter and laws
and the charter and laws
of the city of Clearwater,
of the city of Clearwater,
that I am duly qualified
that I am duly qualified
to hold office
to hold office
under the charter and laws
under the charter and
of
laws
the city of Clearwater,
of the city of Clearwater,
and that I will well and faithfully perform the duties of a police officer
as a police officer
which I'm now about to enter.
and which now I'm about to enter.
Congratulations. Welcome aboard.
Welcome.
Congratulations. Welcome aboard. Congratulations. Be safe. Congratulations. Be safe out there.
Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Welcome aboard.
Welcome. Thank you.
Be safe out there.
Congratulations.
Nice to meet you. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Congratulations, great to have you.
Papa, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Well, congratulations to all. We're very proud of our police. We want you all to stay safe, and it's great to see a legacy. Mr. Walser was one of our finest ever, and he was sworn in 26 years ago, so to see a legacy is always exciting.
Thanks, sir.
Next, I would like to call up Amy Foster for our discussion on homelessness. Good morning.
So are you going to drive or you do? Okay, perfect. I'm thankful to be here with you this morning, and I wanted to kind of present two things for you. I wanted to first start off with some successes, what's working, what's happening over the last 10 years here in Pinellas County. I know all too often you don't get good news, and certainly with the pandemic and our current homeless crisis, it's hard to feel like it's a really heavy lift in order to do something. And then I wanted to share a little bit of data about the needs in our community for you to consider. I also am here just at your service. So any questions you may have or data you want me to go back and get and bring back to you, we'd be happy to do that. So for those of you who aren't familiar, let me just start off mentioning who the Homeless Leadership Alliance is. We are kind of a quasi-government agency that is required to be in existence by HUD. So there's a nonprofit arm that does the work, but there's also what's called a Continuum of Care board. And that board, Councilmember Beckman sits on our executive leadership team, and that is the board that makes the policies for the community and also helps draw down more than $5 million in federal funds to help address this issue. So with that, next slide.
Actually, you can just go ahead and hit the, there you go.
Perfect. So again, as I mentioned, we're going to look at what we've done in the last 10 years because you don't see significant change from year to year. So homelessness in Pinellas County is down 43% in the last 10 years. Across the nation, the figure is 9%. So I'd say here in Pinellas, we're doing pretty good, and your investments are making a difference. In individuals, because of our veteran resources here in Pinellas County, and we are working on making some changes there that we think will see positive change.
What are some of those changes?
So we've hired some new leadership that is from who served in the military and kind of knows how to navigate that. The VA has also put a significant influx of dollars into the system, and one of the challenges we're seeing right now is veterans who are having their rents increased just like everybody else in our community, and so there's some flexibility in what can be done with prevention programs to help them move somewhere else that they may be able to afford. So I do want to caveat this slide that even though family homelessness is down 71%, that right now we have 91 families who are sleeping in their cars or on the street that we know about. Certainly there are more than that. The school system shows about 4,400 children who are instably housed in some way. Our definition of homelessness is defined by HUD. So that means somebody literally homeless on the street. The school board's definition includes those who may be couch surfing, so that's why the difference in numbers. I will tell you that their number of literally homeless hovers around 120, so we're not that far off, but these are people that we know are awaiting shelter. I know all of you are probably aware of the recent changes with Hope Villages of America and Grace House. We certainly believe that is going to significantly impact us with the loss of 60, they say 80 beds. So this is, an area that we have to continue to work on. We are one of the only communities in the United States that does not have enough family beds. And so we had to develop a prioritization assessment to determine who goes into shelter first. So if you have multiple children, if you have a child under 1, if you have medical difficulties, that kind of thing, that would put you closer to the top of the list. Homeless youth has dropped 13%. HUD defines homeless or youth up to the age of 24, so that's 18 to 24. So we're seeing some good changes there as well. This is a particular issue that plagues almost every community in Pinellas County, which is chronic homelessness. Those are people who have been homeless over a year, and they also have a disability. So it's not just the length of time, it also has to do with their diagnoses. And this has actually increased over the last 10 years, but in the last 2 years, we've decreased it by 20%. So we've committed to a program called Built for Zero. which just recently received a $100 million MacArthur Award. And we are learning from other communities. 80 other communities have used the approach that they use. And so we are in our first year of trying those things, and we're seeing it's making a difference. So housing, I don't think there's a single day that you open the paper and you don't see about the challenges in the housing market. And these numbers really reflect those challenges. So in the last 10 years, we housed more than 16,000 people with a 33% success rate. I'll tell you, when I started this work, I was a council member at the time, and I threw all kinds of fits. Who wants a 33% success rate? We want that much higher, right? But actually, this is above the national average for success. In 2019, there were 1,900 people. In 2020, 1,300, and in 2021, 1,200. So that's starting to show that we're having a harder and harder time getting people housed because of the market. One of the things I do want to point out here, though, is during the COVID pandemic, that we kind of used 2020 as a marker year, that success rate was much lower. We started looking at our data. Every decision that the Continuum of Care Board makes is driven by data and understanding what's causing somebody to come back into the system and what do we do to keep that from happening. And so you see that change in 2021 with that 5% increase in success. So when I do this talk for councils across the county, one of the things that they often want to know is, what's happened since COVID, right? We want to look at, is that success continuing? Where are things going? And so I updated this to show you what's happened just in the last 2 years. There has been a 22% decrease in first-time homeless, which is something we pay a lot of attention to. However, unsheltered people are up 20%. That may be because some of our shelters have had to do social distancing and reduce their bed numbers in order to keep people safe. It also may be because more people are losing their housing and ending up on the street. There is a 10% increase in the rate of exits to permanent housing. So even though we have the challenges in the housing market that you read about every day, we are still, over the last 2 years, moving people into permanent housing. And one of the things I'm most proud of is this work on earning income. So one of the things that HUD requires every continuum of care to look at is connecting people to mainstream resources. So if they're eligible for SSI or SSDI or food stamps or other types of benefits, we connect them to those things. But we are also responsible for promoting self-sufficiency, right? So you've got to get to the root cause of why people are becoming homeless, and earned income is a part of that. And so we track the households we work with and whether they've increased their earned income or not. I can tell you for 10 years this was 0%. So while 16% doesn't look like a significant increase, this is a change for us that we're starting to get all of our providers to understand that we've got to get at the root cause. We did use some COVID dollars from the Department of Children and Families to pilot a workforce development specialist. You're all probably aware that there are lots of resources for finding a job here in our community, like CareerSource and others. But one of the things we heard from clients in our race disparity study was the idea that none of those services are working for them. If you think about it, if transportation's a challenge, they can't get to those services. And so our approach was to meet people where they were at, and then also to kind of triage them into 3 groups. So the first group would be people who are never going to be able to hold down a job because of mental health or other reasons. And so our approach with them was to ensure that we could get them connected to SSI or SSDI. The second group are people who have a job but need to increase their income. And so looking at, are there types of trainings or certifications we could help them acquire that would help them earn more money. And then the last group are people who didn't have a job at all and help them finding a job. So we're excited. We just received 3 years of grant funding from the United Way. So we will be able to continue this program for the next 3 years. So I know that you recently lost some affordable housing in your community, and I just wanted to make sure that we're all aware as an entire county on the scope of the need in our COC. We do have a Funders Council that meets every other month. That Funders Council is made up of every jurisdiction in Pinellas County, as well as private partners like Pinellas Community Foundation, the Foundation for Healthy St. Pete, and others. And they look at what are the needs and are we matching our resources to the actual needs. So they're trying to create some alignment. And this is a presentation they have seen, but I think it is shocking every time I look at it. So this is from the Corporation for Supportive Housing. This was their 2021 assessment. And in Pinellas County, we need more than 3,000 units that are affordable to meet the need. Supportive units, if you're not familiar with that term, that means the number of units we need for people who not only need a place to live, but need services surrounding them. And so that's what we mean by supportive units. When we look at other special populations, people who have come out of domestic violence situations, families that are involved in child welfare, those who are exiting prison, the total need goes up, and the affordable units needed are 35,700, and the supportive units needed are approximately 3,500. This is your total cost for Pinellas County, and this is one of the reasons that we are working with every jurisdiction because no one is going to be able to meet this need on their own. So for supportive units, the need would be $806 million, and to build this many affordable units, it would be $7.7 billion. So our lottery system, where we get one project a year from the state, is never going to get us there, and government is going to have to find creative ways to get, tax credits and other things in order to get there. This is just to give you a sense of who's in our system and what's currently waiting versus how it reflects for last year. One of the things I want to call out on this slide that's different, in the 10 years I've been involved in this work, the people in the first column, which we call self-resolve or navigation, has always been about zero. To have 134 people that we have an assessment that's required by HUD that everyone has to do that determines the order that they get services in. So the most vulnerable get services first. If you score in a 0 to 3 range, you're not eligible for those services. This is the number that's scored in that range. So those are people who maybe don't have the types of vulnerabilities we've seen in the past. They've never been in child welfare. They don't have domestic violence or other kinds of situations. They're not using drugs or alcohol. They don't have a mental health situation. They just simply need help finding housing. And self-resolution is a term in the industry that actually is the wrong term. There's no idea that people can actually self-resolve on their own. They really need a little bit of help. So these are people who don't need 12 months worth of assistance, but they likely need some assistance in order to move from one unit to another. So that's the way I like to describe that. In rapid rehousing, there are 1,100 clients waiting for services. That's an 89% increase over the last year. Rapid rehousing, for those of you who are less familiar with that, it's a market rate unit in the community that a provider pays for approximately 6 months while people get on their feet. They are also wrapped with services during that time, and then they move to a self-sustaining program. And then the last one is permanent supportive housing. That again is those who need services over a long term, and that's 267. One of the things that I really also want to call out here is this decrease in the inflow. So you see that there's a decrease even though we're in a crisis. And that really has to do with the amount of prevention dollars that have been in our system through Our Florida, through the county's ERA program. We're seeing that change now that both of those programs are over. Here's our numbers for families. So 81% increase in the number of families who need rapid rehousing, a 17% increase in those who need permanent supportive housing. And again, these are numbers that feel a little bit easier than those individual numbers, right? 1,100 versus 56, it feels like we should be able to do something about this and actually get to a resolution. So I'm really here for questions. I just wanted to provide a little bit of context and information, and then would love to be able to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Ms. Foster? Councilmember Albritton.
So the homeless that don't seem to really want to have a home, what programs do you have to try to get them into society, basically?
I think that's a great question. So for those that have been on the street for a long time, we recently held a community consensus building day around street outreach. And one of the things that we heard our street outreach officers across the county say over and over again is people don't want help, right? And so as we further unpacked that, we recognize that it's not that people don't want help, they don't want the type of help that's being offered. And what I mean by that is there is a lot of folks who the only option for them is to go to Safe Harbor, which was really designed as a jail diversion program, not a shelter, and they don't want to go to Safe Harbor. And so the social worker side of those street outreach teams had success story after success story of those that they worked with over time and built relationship and rapport with, and then were able to move them into housing, but it took time. And so I really believe that the investment in street outreach, where you can develop time and relationships with folks, is the answer, because you really have to get at what they need. So one of the approaches with Built for Zero is this idea of what we call in the homeless system a by name list. And that means that we need to know every single person who's on the street, what their name is and what their needs are. And in communities, Chattanooga is one community that's had a huge success rate with this. And so one of the things is when you start to know people by name and what they need, in Chattanooga in particular, one problem they unpacked when they started using their data was that people weren't leaving this one shelter. And why weren't they leaving that one shelter? And they started to figure out that they were veterans. And somehow in the medical system, in the veteran world there, they had a belief that if they left there, they weren't going to be eligible for dental benefits. And so nurses would whisper in their ear and say, if you leave here, you're not going to get your dental needs taken care of. So once they figured that out from their data, they were able to address that by saying, okay, let's get dental services over here and get people connected. And then they were able to clear out and address that problem. You know, other very small examples, I'll just call this person Joe, somebody who'd been on the street for a very long time. Through building that rapport, they understood that Joe really wanted to watch baseball. And so they had to find him a unit where there was a TV and he could watch baseball, and that was the reason he finally said yes. And so I think that individualized approach, again, we're using data to look at our entire system and find where those barriers are, and then individualized approach based on what a person needs.
Anything else on that?
Well, I do agree with you. I think it's a one-on-one approach with people like that, because I'll call him Joe too. I've been helping somebody over the years that goes to my church, and now he finally has a job, which is great, but it's hard to get him off the street. I mean, he doesn't want to go where other people are. I wish I could just get him out of the edges and into something like that. And say it's really hard.
Councilmember Albritton, one of the things, you have somebody from the aquarium was helping someone like that and reached out to us, and they've been doing this for years. And after I was able, we have a data base that everybody in our community enters into. It's a requirement of their government contracts. And after I started looking at that person's history, I was able to say to them, your help is actually hurting, right? It's keeping her from getting the case management and to address the root causes that's really needed, right? And so I think that's an important component of this. I know Councilmember Beckman often talks in our meetings about case management, and case management is really the answer to moving people into homes. Certainly affordable housing is the answer to homelessness, but when people have other traumas that maybe have landed them into that particular predicament, then they need those supports in order to be successful.
Yep.
Councilmember Bunker.
With the loss of those 60 or so units from Hope Villages, are there even places for those people to go now?
The answer is no.
So those units themselves, those are now going to be used for affordable housing. But I tried to help somebody I ran across about a month ago trying to find a place. And calling up all the agencies, it was impossible. If she had had children, then yeah. But Safe Harbor seems to be the only option, and that seems like such a scary spot. We need to do better at finding people some privacy. You can't just be sleeping on a mat in a huge space. So what can we do to really help?
I think it's a good question. I'm going to start with Safe Harbor, right? So, I want to be sensitive to the fact that Safe Harbor is our only low barrier, we call it, shelter in the community that's open 7 days a week, 24/7. So somebody can walk into that location at any time. Other programs in our community that are also important, I'll just use Pinellas Hope as an example. They do intake 1 time a week, right? I think there's a resourcing issue there. Their case management is like 180, 80 to 1, and it should be 15 to 1. So we've created a work group that is looking at solutions for what do we do to help the sheriff with Safe Harbor. So I think that's one step, right? And I know the county is concerned about, we already have $10 million in resources wrapped up in homeless services. We can't add more, so what do we do? And I don't think that money is always the answer. Sometimes it's about being strategic in how you deploy the resources you already have. So for example, the Homeless Leadership Alliance has a diversion specialist. Diversion specialists help people not enter shelter. So we're calling aunties and saying, hey, can they stay on your couch if we help with your electric bill? Things that are temporary, but keep them from entering. And that diversion specialist for individuals is deployed at Safe Harbor, so he can have those conversations. So one of the things that we've talked to the county about is what other services in that $10 million that you fund can be housed within Safe Harbor and help address that. Certainly there still needs to be more resources, but that may be one approach that helps us get there. A team that triages folks and gets them, one of the things that's needed is called document readiness, so they have to have certain papers to qualify for HUD's programs. And so if there's a team in-house there that they're funding from some other provider, they can start working with those clients because they're seeing them day in and day out. I do think, however, that many communities are still providing the same amount of resources that they provided many years ago, and that would be something to look at. Clearwater, for example, doesn't have a social action funding program. The city of St. Pete does, and they put approximately $1 million, I think it's about $800,000 right now, into that to help address the challenges that they're seeing as a municipality. One of the things that I'm worried about, I know I sent it to Chuck and Kathleen the other day, is that we're seeing a significant increase. One of the questions that's asked anytime somebody is met on the street or assessed is, where did you sleep last night? And just over the last couple of months, about a 10% increase in Clearwater. So we need to start unpacking that and understanding, why is that? Is there something that's changed? Is it just our economic situation, or is there something else that's changed that we need to know in order to figure out why you're having that increase?
Thank you.
On increasing people's income, exactly what programs do you have? Because that's, to me, the biggest way to end homelessness.
Yeah, I mean, it really is that one program. There's one person that, again, is funded by United Way for the next 3 years to assess those 3 groups that I mentioned and figure out, what's the need, and then to help people get employed. And there's certainly a need for more of that. One of the things you could think about is with home ARPA, which may or may not already be all allocated, Chuck and Denise, I'm not sure. That is an allowable expense under home ARPA. They allow what's called supportive services. And so that may be one approach, is to deploy more workforce development specialists. I'll tell you that one of the challenges we find with your community, so we have a housing navigation specialist funded by CDBG-CV with the city of Clearwater. You're leveraging those dollars with the city of Largo. And all of you know that your tax zip codes are, could say Clearwater and it's really Largo and all of that. Oftentimes when people come to us and we think they're from the city of Clearwater, they're not from Clearwater or Largo. We're having a really hard time finding those citizens that actually live in Clearwater. They think they do, but the way, your map is drawn, it makes it challenging sometimes to find the right people to help. So I offer the workforce specialist idea as an option, but when you have a municipality by municipality approach instead of a countywide approach, it makes it hard for people to be able to get service because of all the strings that go with federal money.
How are you working with HEP and Salvation Army and St. Vincent de Paul?
Yeah, so one of the things that's required is that every we call them participating agencies, become a member of the continuum of care, and they help provide the solutions and the ideas about what their challenges are through various councils. So I mentioned that Funders Council we have. We also have a Providers Council. HEP is actually the vice chair of providers, and Ashley Lowry also sits on the COC board. But we are constantly working with them to come up with solutions with whether they have property or whether they have land or other things that they could apply for funds that we may have available. Or we can advocate for, other funds that may be available that they would qualify for. So most recently, HEP was successful in winning a county contract to address homeless families. And so they are bringing their 8 family units back online that were offline because of COVID. They were using them for quarantine purposes in order to serve some families, but they are hoping to be able to transition other units they have on their property to serve more families. And so those are conversations we're constantly having. We have a special opportunity that we've never had before. HUD has out what's called a special NOFO. NOFO stands for Notice of Funding Opportunity. The only way you ever increase the amount of money that comes to your community, you would think that there would be some kind of formula based on the number of people you have homeless, that's how much money you get from the federal government. Well, that's not how it works. And so the only way you ever increase that money is through special NOFOs that are announced, and you're successful in acquiring that, and then it gets put in what's called your annual renewal demand, and you can get that year after year for funding purposes. So we have the opportunity in this special NOFO to receive $4.7 million, which is almost the amount we bring down now. And it is specifically to address unsheltered populations. And so we are just starting the work of bringing together our community partners like HEP, Salvation Army, and others to say, what do you have that you can do? How can we increase units if you had this $4.7 million, and then put in a competitive application to do that? I know Salvation Army recently came to us because they were in they had a unique situation where they have some extra dollars to deploy. And so they came to us and said, how could we best use these dollars? And we talked about prevention, and so they were able to put some of those dollars on the street to help families while the county and state program was drying up.
Vice Mayor.
Well, and what's good about that special NOFO that's coming up, we just had a meeting with the Safe Harbor Funders group I shared with you that Safe Harbor study and recommendations, and that can dovetail nicely into the special NOFO that has really tight parameters in that a lot of groundwork is already done, and it is the unsheltered population. So that's a positive there, and we can be creative, and we need to include homeless people as a requirement of this special HUD grant, and so they're built in right there at Safe Harbor. So that's, that helps us make that happen. But I so appreciate Amy being here. She's, a friend. I met Amy first when I was a guardian ad litem, and she was working with the Guardian Ad Litem Foundation. And then, I got elected and immediately served on the COC, and it's been a labor of love, but it's intense. It's multiple meetings every month, and it's as you guys understand, it's a difficult and challenging problem that's not really going to be solved, but we're going to make big progress. So I have a number of questions that I just wanted out here for some clarification. Also, I feel it's important to have this discussion and understanding as we lead into our budget discussions in the coming weeks. So, Amy, a number of people in our COC have voiced concern about this coming tsunami of homeless in our region. Can you explain that or elaborate on what you're thinking for the next?
Yeah, I think that we initially, as we were preparing for the tsunami, and it was often called that on calls, we thought it was going to come when the eviction moratorium ended, and that's not what happened necessarily. So then we started thinking, what's next? When is it coming? I think the answer is now. Now that a lot of these programs are over, we are seeing a significant influx in first-time homeless. But it is not necessarily through evictions that are driving that. It is through the increase of market rate units. The average length of time it takes someone to find new housing when maybe their lease isn't renewed is 97 to 107 days. And so you can imagine that if they're on month to month and they have to leave in the next month, we are seeing people go into hotel, motel, or their vehicles simply because they're working, they have income, they simply can't find something they can afford in the community.
And that's like the ALICE report, right?
Yeah, and actually, so ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed, and that is a particular group that United Way looks at, and that certainly is a problem. But one of the things that I think is a myth that's really important for everyone to know is that the majority of people in our homeless system, they are working. There are a few who are chronically homeless, who have significant mental health or substance abuse or other things, but many of the people we help are employed in our hospitality industry. So if they're cleaning a room on the beach and their child gets sick and they don't have benefits in order to get paid while they take off, what happens is they're not able to pay their bills, and one economic issue then creates a tsunami that they're not able to get out of.
Data shows that allocating funds to homeless prevention has the biggest ROI. Can you explain this? Like, where does that money come from for homeless prevention, and is it adequate?
Great question, and I should have put that on our slide to help you understand that. So there are about 19,000 people who come into the homeless system here in Pinellas County every year, which is shocking to me. You'd never think that that number would be that large. We can show year over year, as prevention dollars have increased, that the number of people coming into the system have decreased. So we know prevention works. To give you a dollar amount, if you're wanting to look at this from a fiscal perspective, not only considering that it is less traumatic for families and individuals to not come into homelessness. Whenever someone becomes homeless, let's not even count the shelter and, the case management and all those services. The average cost for us to rehouse somebody is about $6,000. If we prevent them from becoming homeless by helping with 1 month's rent, that kind of thing, our average cost is about $1,600. And we also have data to show, lots of programs in our community have all these requirements, criteria, right? You've got to be sustainable, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. Our programs at HLA that run prevention programs have none of that. And within a year, 98% of those people are still housed. 98%. So all that criteria about, you got to have sustainability and you got to have all that, we have data to prove that with just a little bit of help, usually people are able to make it a lot longer. So to answer your question about where that money comes from, because we have such a significant homeless problem in our community, we're actually higher than large communities like Miami-Dade. We're one of the top in the nation for our size. We're always in this report to Congress that we don't want to be in for that reason. We are not allowed to use our federal dollars on prevention. So you have to have solved your homelessness problem in order to get your federal dollars for that intervention, and we are not able to do that through our continuum of care funding. So those dollars have to come from state and local municipalities or private funders.
So if we're looking for the biggest ROI, bang on our buck, it's for prevention and diversion?
Yes. And one of the ways that I like to describe that for folks, that's if you're a visual thinker, is think about a bathtub, right? The bathtub's already full. We got 19,000 people. We've got to turn off the spigot and keep water from going in the tub to keep us from overflowing, and that's what prevention does. So then as we're able to create more affordable units and permanent supportive units, that is the drain, is the outflow for the system, when that spigot's off, it makes the whole flow work.
So what can our municipality do to help with that? I mean, and how can we make a difference and stay in our lane?
I think stay in your lane is an interesting way to think about it, because there's no way we're going to solve homelessness without everybody at the table. Traditionally, I will tell you, our beach communities have not been very involved, and suddenly our beach communities are coming to us saying, we want to be at the table, we want to be a part of the solution. And so Treasure Island, Gulfport, have been having conversations with us. We're hopeful that they will help us get some of our other smaller beach communities involved. Treasure Island's a great example. Instead of creating a grant program through their general fund dollars, they decided instead to create a nonprofit, and they found a funder to a donor to fund that, and then that's going to be their approach. They're also looking at investing in street outreach in Treasure Island and Gulfport, and they're kind of piggybacking together to share a person. And one of the things that they're looking at that I think is really interesting is we're trying to change the narrative that homelessness isn't a public safety crisis, it's a public health crisis. And they're the ones who are already using this approach. And so in Gulfport and Treasure Island, they asked if their fire and EMS could have access to our database. And traditionally across the country, police is not allowed access because of the sensitive information in there. The COC took a vote and said, yeah, we want fire and EMS to be a part of this. And so through that work, fire and EMS said, here's the top 5 individuals that we are transporting over and over again, costing our city a bunch of money. And street outreach looked for those 5 people, figured out what they needed, got them access to the county blue card for health services, and is looking at it from a more preventative nature than addressing it as, the hair's on fire.
Well, and what's interesting about that with Treasure Island and Gulfport, so here's a little bit that's interesting. We have a wonderful, talented man who lives in the community, just moved here I think he lives at Station Square. His name is Dan McDonald. He's a retired police officer from Tampa who spent his career in street outreach. And he is working with Treasure Island and the new mayor, Tyler Payne, there. And you're right, he views it as it's a community program. And to talk about giving people a name and having name case management, that's what they're doing there. So they meet and talk about these homeless people by name. What do they need? It's individualized, right? And working them and meeting them where they're at. But I think they only have like 12 that are chronic. So I mean, it's manageable, it's doable. I think they had a $10,000 grant to start it up. But what's important too is that they are reporting that data into HMIS. So that's our countywide health HMIS. Tell me what it is.
Homeless Management
Information systems, right? And that you're required to pay for this software to enter this data. So it'll be interesting to see their progress on that. But again, I think, as I advocate for case management, you've got that whole report from Safe Harbor that has recommendations to place these people, and you've got all this column of estimated cost, and we don't have blank columns for funding sources. And so that's where I think we can step in as a city and start allocating some funds for prevention, diversion, and individual case management to make a real difference. Our funding has been stagnant for over 10 years. I said that last year when we had discussions about this. So let's see if I had.
Councilmember Shea has questions as well.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Thanks. Actually, it's not a question. It's actually, I want to contribute to this discussion. And you touched on it lightly, and I would like to expand on that. I come from, I think, a very different perspective. I'm a retired nurse, so I think I have a strong grasp on the challenges of mental illness and addiction, which is something that the homeless community, by large, is facing. And I have taken care of patients with mental issues as well as addictions, and part of their treatment plan has been very outcome-driven, very goal-oriented, and it never included in that treatment plan anything that enabled that negative situation, for lack of a better word. I'm also coming from the perspective of that I've owned a business in downtown for many years, and I live downtown. So when I look at these presentations, they're not just numbers to me. It's something that I experience every day, all day. So it's not an abstract thing for me. The thing that concerns me is that I have witnessed entities and people who are well-meaning, that I applaud their efforts, who are engaging in activities that enable homelessness rather than eradicate, divert, prevent. And what I would like everyone to consider is the consequences of those actions. Those consequences are felt by those that live in areas where those homeless loiter. And those consequences are not something to sneeze at. Random feedings with no wraparound services, while it makes those people feel great, they do leave that area and go home to their safe homes and leave behind dozens of homeless people who are loitering, who engage in criminal activity, who are in the throes of psychotic breaks, that people like myself and business owners have to endure. We have people sleeping in parking lots so that we are alarmed when we come in, go to work at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning. Criminal activity just this weekend at Station Square. We have human excrement all over our condos and apartment buildings. And so what I'm looking for is an organized and effective plan rather than unorganized, well-meaning entities and people who just sporadically feed and enable this situation. And I would like to speak for those people who are not in these numbers, that are not in these presentations, and that is the residents that are facing the byproduct of this homelessness. And I have been in situations where I'm uncomfortable. And you talk about public health, absolutely. When I have to step outside my door and step over human excrement, that is public health. When I have to walk and see homeless in full psychotic breaks, and I feel that my safety is of concern, I think that needs to be considered as well. And so, in my mind, as a health professional, I'm always looking at the end or the goal. The goal is to divert and minimize homelessness. It's not to pat ourselves in the back and say we're great people. So when I'm looking at those goals and I work myself backwards, there's two things that need to occur: willingness and ability. For those homeless individuals who are unwilling to get out of the streets, I think we need to just accept that that's their right, but I don't think that it's where we need to focus our resources. We need to focus on those who are willing to leave the streets but are unable to, and then we provide the services and the tools to eradicate that. But to just, without thought and organization, just assign resources to just enable this the situation, I think, is something that we need to avoid. And as someone who represents many people in downtown that have been so concerned with this, not only, and I don't want to portray the people of downtown, whether it's business owners or residents, as callous people, because we understand these are people in need. But we don't think that what's being done is effective. When we have 14 people, like this Saturday, engaged in a violent act in front of Station Square, and I can't walk across without being involved, I have to question, are we doing the right thing? And how do we juggle or juggle the rights of the homeless and the rights of those who are residents and business owners here? We have the right to feel safe. We have the right to have a business where our customers are not panhandled or yelled at or felt to be unsafe. And so, although I am very concerned and I'm willing to, look at all these options, I want us to be laser focused on how do we achieve the goal? To reduce homelessness. That's what we need to be laser focused on. And random feedings or duplicated services, I think, has shown that it's not been effective. I just wanted to say that.
Ms. Foster, do you have a list of the different contributions from all the municipalities?
I can provide that to you, yes.
That would be great, along with this presentation.
Okay, absolutely.
Anything else, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I would say to Councilmember Teixeira, I agree that, we need to deal with the challenges of homeless who are downtown defecating and causing an unsafe environment. But I would lead you to the stats and data on Safe Harbor. This is where we take our homeless. And when we have case management ratios of 1 to 172, it's no wonder they only stay there an average of 2 days, or they're cycling in and out. And so if you're talking, you say without thought and organization to assign resources, the COC, in conjunction with the HLA, has incredible talent, thought, and organization. It doesn't have money enough to get the work done, to fund where we know it makes the most difference, has the most return on investment. With preventing it, with prevention and diversion, number one, stopping that flow, and then individualized case management. We don't have mental health institutions that we throw people in anymore. And so we need to care for them at other facilities, and that takes money. Amy, you want to elaborate?
I would also offer, what you say is absolutely correct, right? And so that is why we talk about trying to prevent and divert homelessness and not to keep people where they're at. And case management is a part of that answer. And what I would say to you, having sat in your shoes and thinking about how I might approach that, would be to look at how the city of Clearwater can use its dollars to meet the specific need of the businesses. And then maybe the county, I know the county is about to start a street medicine program using home ARPA dollars. Many of the types of individuals that you're describing likely need injections and other types of medicine resources. I've seen those things make a huge difference, right? So once they're medicated, they're more willing to go into shelter. So let the county do the part that you're really not interested in Clearwater Resources being a part of, and then use your resources towards case management and prevention and diversion and other things, right? So I think that's the beauty of a countywide approach, and then also what jurisdictions individually want to do is your community and what they need best. Chief Slaughter was very clear at our consensus building that it's both for him. He understands that there's a public health crisis, and he also has a public safety crisis. And that's why when the county came to him and said, hey, can we take your social worker from you? He said, no. Right? We want someone paired with our officers to do this work. And so Clearwater had a different need than, another community, and I think there's room for both.
Okay, Councilmember Bunker and then our city manager, and I want to wrap this up. We've got a big agenda, and I've got a hard stop at 12:45, so.
Okay. I mean, this is the message that we hear most about the homeless. Get them out of my sight. And we got to do more than just say, don't feed the bears. There's one entity downtown that has the money to do this like that, and they're not interested. Unfortunately, I can't talk to anyone within Scientology, but if there's anyone else on the council who has an in, who might say, hey, let's get some of your donated dollars to solve this problem down here and be a good neighbor. I think that might be a good thing to do. The guy who owns KnowBe4 can donate $1 million to David Miscavige, and then that money is not really doing anything to help anybody. It gets put into the $2 billion that they have in the bank. But they might be good neighbors and help us out at least downtown.
Mr. Jennings?
Thank you, Mayor. And I know we need to move forward, and I have many, many questions. So most recently, I was the city manager in Portland, Maine. We actually ran shelters, multiple shelters, family shelters, overnight shelters, many other wraparound and supportive services. And we had a very strong focus on housing individuals experiencing homelessness. Did I understand you correctly that we have a 33% rate of success when housing people?
That's correct.
Okay. Because we had upwards to 80%.
Well, so it does vary based on intervention. So let me explain that. The numbers I presented to you are system-wide. As I described earlier, diversion and prevention has a 98% success rate. Shelter has the lowest success rate. Rapid rehousing has a much higher success rate. And so you might want to look at that intervention by intervention.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to get together with you. I've initiated a conversation with the county administrator about a county-wide approach. But yes, if you have time, I would love to dig into your data and so forth.
Foster, I want to thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
Also want to congratulate you on your new role.
Thank you.
That's forthcoming. I know Mayor Welsh is thrilled.
Thank you.
And you will be hard to replace.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Y'all have a
Amy.
great day.
All right, we're going to recess the work session and call to order the special meeting of the pension trustees. I'd ask if there are any amendments to the minutes of the June 13th, 2022 meeting. Have a motion?
I move we approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Are there any citizens to be heard for the pension trustees? Seeing none, item 4.1. Ms.
Good morning.
Boyer.
Mayor and Council, Jennifer Poyer, Human Resources Director. For this item, I will turn it over to the City Attorney, Dave Margolis.
Hi, good morning, trustees. So this item has to do with the relationship between the trustees, all of whom are sitting here today, and the Pension Advisory Committee. The Pension Advisory Committee is a subset of and is subordinate to each of you as the trustees, or all of you collectively. It gets a little bit strange in Clearwater only because the Pension Advisory Committee includes three of the trustees, right, which is the mayor, Councilmember Bunker, and Councilmember Teixeira, but also includes three employees who are elected by the membership, and a seventh person who is a citizen selected by the other six. That relationship, however, is important because the PAC, or the Pension Advisory Committee, has the sole jurisdiction to review employees' applications for disability pensions. And so those applications for disability pensions typically do not come before this entire body of trustees for review. Rather, they come specifically to the PAC. And so we have three of you who sit on the PAC, but not all five of you. And then, as I said, those three are joined by the three employee representatives as well as the seventh citizen. That's been Clearwater's practice for a long time. I'm supportive of it. There's, I think, one PAC member who has suggested that I would like to do away with that. I don't. I'm supportive of it. However, because of that relationship, for the city attorney's office, it's important ethically for us to ensure that we know who we are representing and whose interests we are looking out for. As the city attorney, my duty of loyalty is to every person on this dais. That's true regardless of whether you are sitting with your hat as city council members, whether you're sitting with your hat as CRA agency, or in this instance, whether you're sitting with your hat as pension trustees. So I have indicated to each of you and to city staff that when it comes to the PAC meeting specifically, it is important for me to maintain that continuity. And so when we have the mayor, Councilmember Bunker, and Councilmember Teixeira sitting on the PAC, I would like to continue that role as a neutral advisor rather than serving as an advocate for city staff. This becomes an issue when we talk about disability pensions, as I said, because when an employee applies for a disability pension, there can be some pretty significant money at stake, particularly when we deal with younger employees who could have decades of benefits ahead of them. So this item is designed to give authorization from the trustees to hire an outside attorney to represent the executive branch of government as an advocate for Ms. Poyer, Mr. Ravens, and the executive branch of government when they are presenting disability cases or weighing in on disability cases that come before the PAC. Ethically, I cannot serve that function while simultaneously representing the PAC as a neutral advisor. So it's really just a question of which way we slice the pie. As the three PAC members heard from one of the other PAC members, right? We cannot do both as a city attorney's office. I can either serve as an advocate for the executive branch of government in front of the PAC, or I can serve as a neutral advisor, but not both. And it's my opinion that it's best I continue to serve as neutral advisor. So that's effectively what this is. The law firm that we're recommending is the law firm of banker Lopez Gassler. The reason they're selected is because their attorney, Mark Hungate, has been the city's longtime workers' comp attorney. And as the city's longtime workers' comp attorney, he will be familiar with all of the facts of these cases, and he'll be in a good position, I believe, to advise Ms. Poyer or Mr. Ravens on all of these issues. So happy to take questions.
Any questions for Mr. Margolis?
I have a
Vice Mayor.
question. When that PAC meets to review a long-term disability claim, and we have three members that sit on that PAC, can Councilmember Albritton and I be privy to the details of those cases as you three are?
You can get the entire report. It's voluminous.
It certainly is. They are public meetings, so certainly anyone can attend. But to the Vice Mayor's question, that's also one of the reasons why I feel it's important for me to serve as the neutral advisor for the PAC, because right now we have 5 trustees on the dais, and yet we have 2 trustees, yourself and Councilmember Albritton, who are not participating in the PAC. And so it's important, I think, for me to be able to keep all 5 of you equally informed. And since the 2 of you cannot talk to the other 3 outside the sunshine, it's really incumbent on me to keep each of you informed. So that's another reason why I'm setting it up this way, so that all 5 trustees are equally informed as to what happens at the PAC. But to the mayor's point, it certainly is quite extensive in terms of the medical evidence, and the meetings themselves are open to the public if you'd like to attend.
Is that private medical information tagged in an agenda for public review? I mean, all that stuff?
In order to be eligible for a disability pension, they will typically have to submit to a public hearing. That doesn't mean necessarily that every record is accessible to the public, but in order to even get your foot in the door, so to speak, as an employee, you must submit to a rather public process by which the PAC will in fact discuss medical information.
Okay. Thanks.
They can be upwards of 1,000 pages.
Fun times.
Any other questions? Have a motion to approve?
Move to approve agenda item 4.1.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Anything else, Ms. Boyer?
Yes, sir.
All right. We'll adjourn the pension trustees and reconvene the work session. We are on item 3.1.
Accept the Office of Resilience and Coastal Protection's Resilient Florida Fiscal Year 21-22 Planning Grant Award for the development of a citywide vulnerability assessment using the City Simulator tool of Atkins, North America.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Sheridan Jamont, Sustainability Coordinator. We are excited to have been awarded a grant from the State of Florida's Resilient Florida Program. And the next agenda item will touch on it more, but with this grant, we seek to conduct a citywide vulnerability assessment to better understand how climate factors such as flooding and extreme heat will impact the city in the near and distant future. Staff is seeking approval to allocate time and resources to fulfill this grant program. Thank you.
Questions? And these are kind of married items, the next 2.
I have
Vice Mayor.
I'm super excited about this. It's nice that we have this grant, and I know we've got in the budget, hopefully a grant writer. I was looking at this, and it looks like pages 19 to 24 are the most critical, that there are these 2 teams for participation. And I had, so there are kickoff meetings and these tech committees, Pat and Tech I've got. But anyway, it looks, oh, I know, that it is recommended that the committees be limited to no more than 10 representatives to better understand meeting outcomes. But we want community engagement in these, right? I mean, so we could talk about the plan later, but.
Yeah, and so it's a project advisory team is the first one, and so that will be a smaller group of mostly city staff and Atkins staff. And then there's a technical advisory committee, which will be doing all of the data review and review of the plan. That will be made of staff, but also we're looking to invite some regional partners, such as Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, Ford, Pinellas, and others, just to make sure we're having that regional lens.
And then I didn't know, do we have a projected time? I think the timeline's on here. That's right, I've got it on page. Okay. It's exciting, so I think it's a good thing. Thanks.
So is this enough money to do a full-blown study, or will there be additional monies needed down the road?
So what we expect is that
Not solutions, I'm just talking study.
with this report, it'll be sufficient in order for us to then put together a climate action plan. So right now, Greenprint is mostly entirely focused on sustainability, which is great, and it's needed to reduce how much greenhouse gas emissions we produce to have a more favorable future. But it doesn't have that resilience component, which is how are we going to address what's already happening and what is going to happen regardless of those emission reductions. So what we expect with this plan is that the solutions that come out of it will allow us to then create that more holistic climate action plan. So we don't foresee another additional study on top of this. Now, things change, so 5 to 10 years, there could be additional studies just to see, what's happening now.
So I'm going to ask all my questions on both of these items, but after the digital twin is completed, who determines the scenarios that will be tested?
So I do have Atkins staff here, so Chris might be
Okay.
able to elaborate, but I believe that's the city, but I can let Chris. He might have just stepped out to the bathroom. So.
Perfect time.
I believe it's city staff where we will select the scenarios, and then we can decide, how we will look at them moving forward.
So take this in the spirit it's meant. I mean, are there standards that are already in place? Are, what's being tested unique to each individual city? I mean, are we qualified to determine what ought to be tested?
For the grant, there are things that we absolutely have to look at in order to meet the grant requirements. And so that in itself is a form of standardization. So across the state, that's what they're requiring. And the traditional sense of what a vulnerability assessment is, there are key things that you have to hit in order to label something a vulnerability assessment. Now, with this tool, yes.
Okay.
And I might have you repeat your question. But with this tool, we really will be going above and beyond what's required by the states, not only in how we examine flooding, but also because we're incorporating the effects of extreme heat, which very frequently is left out of the conversation. I wanted to ask, for the scenarios, is that determined by city staff, or would we work with Atkins? The mayor might repeat his question.
Yeah, I said after the digital twin is completed, who determines the scenarios that will be tested?
So the plan is to have a kind of a two-tier input into the project. So there's going to be a project action team that's going to be city staff that's going to help with the GIS and the asset management. Then there's a technical advisory committee outside of that. So we work with your project management team here to figure out what those scenarios are. And it's not just a scenario per se of one thing that happened. A scenario could be we want to buy all the property in a 500-year floodplain, plus we want to do elevation of all the houses to a certain level. It's very flexible in how it can be presented. So you guys are designing the scenarios, we're modeling them for you, and then that will be iterative. So like the top 5 scenarios that come out in your favor, we'll rerun those again to try to optimize that solution for you guys. So you guys are designing it. We're just kind of helping you and holding hands for that part.
So what cities have you performed in already that are most similar to ours?
So I guess, again, to the point that the tool is flexible, there's a couple cities on the southeast side of the state, Surfside and those communities, Hollywood down there, that we're doing it with. Some communities, we're doing it with Atlanta, we're doing it with Boulder, Colorado, we're doing it with North Carolina DOT right now. We have a huge 100-mile corridor that we're looking at implications there from future climate scenarios. So it's very flexible. We do it for a lot of communities, and it depends on what they want to get out of that process.
So have you written this program, or?
Yes.
So it's proprietary?
It is proprietary. A lot of the information that's used is not proprietary. It's just, we'll down sample federal data sets. We'll use your data sets. Obviously, this area is very data rich, so we'll incorporate local data as best we can for it. It's an extension onto Esri platforms and other platforms that communities already have. And in this case, with this scenario, we are kind of doing it for you, but there are options in the future for counties and cities to take the tool on and manage it and run it themselves if they want to.
Other questions or comments?
Are you going to involve or inform the EAB about this?
So we currently don't have it on the agenda for this week. We can include it as like an older item, but certainly as it's going on, it's intended to be, or it will be about a year of a process. So there are multiple points throughout the study to involve the environmental advice report.
And we'll have intermittent reports throughout that study part, like how things are going?
We could provide those, yeah.
I think it's exciting. Grant money, that's good.
Consent?
Yep.
Item 3.2.
Approve an engineer of record work order to Atkins, North America for the development of a citywide vulnerability assessment.
We answered many questions on this already, but are there any remaining questions that we could help with?
Any other questions? Consent?
Yep.
All right. 4.1, thank you very much.
Adopt a tentative millage rate of 5.9550 mils for fiscal year 2022-23. Set public hearing dates on the budget for September 15, 2022 and September 29, 2022.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of the council. We have a presentation today as to how we developed the recommended budget moving forward. I want to give some top-line information to all of you, and Kayleen will take it from there. So once again, we are proposing a balanced budget for fiscal year 2022-23. It will have the same millage rate as the current year, which, by the way, this will be the fifth year in a row of 5.9550 mils moving forward. We have, fortunately, restored all of the revenues from COVID, and we've seen rather impressive property values grow by 13%, 13.2% actually. Part of the reorganization when I came in 9 months ago, I found that we really needed to have more of a focus on what I always refer to as the right-of-way. So streets and sidewalks, medians, and with that, because of the way the city has been organized, there was divided responsibility between departments. And so in creating a public works department, which you approved of a month ago, and thank you for that, we're able to reorganize into this public works and have a singular focus on those things that are so important to our residents, such as sidewalks, though, where we're not creating or we're not attending to tripping hazards, for instance, any number of others. We've made tremendous progress. Our engineering department, our Parks and Recreation department, over the last 8 months have actually made incredible progress. Over 150 of those hazards have been fixed. We're still dealing with hazards that are really tree-based right now, but we'll continue to do that. So that's the retrospective part of this. Really what we want to be able to do is have this new department to be able to be prospectively going out and addressing not only problems, but also making sure we have viable sidewalks for our pedestrians. The other part of this is, frankly, some of our streets are in desperate need for paving and even more attention. So for us, that this is kind of a natural thing to be recommending to all of you. The other part of this, which I've mentioned before, in government, particularly at the municipal level, we have a tendency to really be focused and reactive to whatever the issue is of the moment. We're always kind of reacting to complaints or issues, and so we don't take a lot of time and think about how we can proactively address issues before they become problems. Hence the reason for the creation of the Office of Innovation. This office will work seamlessly across the city with every single department to look at ways in which we can address many, many issues that residents care about, but also things that we haven't even thought about. There are any number of areas in which we need to really be focused on going forward. Transportation, traffic enhancements, the use of artificial intelligence in things that we do. I mean, there's so many areas, and this is one of the areas that I get most excited about, is the opportunity to move the city forward and really to be a leader in this area. And so I'm excited to move that forward. Now, with all of this, and also the requests of the community, such as reopening bathrooms in various parts of the city, addressing the challenges that will come our way with opening up a very large park, frankly, some of the public safety issues that we're already experiencing. The recommendation to all of you is to add 33.8 new positions that will really address all of these concerns that we have found, and certainly I have found since I've been here. It really is, and I know these are always difficult discussions when you're talking about increasing full-time positions, but we cannot continue to ask our staff to do more with less, and because frankly the return simply isn't there. The other issue, which this is the one area in which I have the most concern about, is really the wage adjustments that we need to make because of what we're seeing in the market. This is one of those areas in which, of course, we can move up, we can move down depending on what the overall economy is going to be. And so I think we've had to make certain wage adjustments in order to remain competitive in the market, and we're going to continue to have to do that with certain positions. There is a hyper need, and I want to stress that word, hyper need, for maintaining our facilities and our services. There are certain areas of our city where we have not, particularly our own public buildings and so forth, where we haven't done as good of a job as what we should have been doing in terms of maintaining our physical facilities. But we also need, because we're being asked to do more, is to provide greater services. The beach is growing, continues to grow, which is a wonderful thing. You know, we have additional hotels that are being contemplated and some that are in the final stages of being built. With that comes more issues involving public safety. And so the chief and I worked very closely together to add 10 additional officers in this budget in order for us to be able to spread resources. So we're not abandoning one section of the city that needs public safety in order to address a growing area such as the beach. And then, of course, as was mentioned earlier, we are really kind of looking to the future. We have this amazing project, Imagine Clearwater, which is on time and on budget, which will come online June of next year. We have already been talking with the community and internal discussions about how programming is going to take place, what we're anticipating that's going to be happening. And I'm not necessarily talking about the amphitheater, I'm talking about the remainder of Coachman Park. So, and of course that's going to take a lot of staff time and others. So what we're about to present to you is a bit of like turning a very large ship. You know, we've begun the process of turning the ship to focus in a little bit of a different direction, and we'll continue to do that without increasing the budget and maintaining the current millage rate. So that is where we are, and if okay with all of you, I'd like to turn it over to Kayleen.
Without increasing the millage rate.
That's what
The budget is increasing.
I'm sorry, yes.
Good
Ms.
morning,
Castle.
Mayor, Council, Kayleen Castle, Budget Officer. The fiscal year 22-23 proposed budget for all city operating funds, special revenue funds, and capital improvement funds is $652,415,095. This reflects a 4% increase from the 21-22 amended total city budget. This slide is a breakdown of that $652 million total by fund type. The general fund budget for fiscal year 23 reflects a 3% increase from the current year's amended budget. The budget for fiscal year 23 includes the increases estimated for wage study adjustments, new FTEs that are proposed, partial year operating expenses for Imagine Clearwater Coachman Park operations, and debt service costs for Imagine bonds. The utility funds total, which includes the budget for water and sewer, stormwater, Gas and solid waste and recycling operations reflects a 6% decrease from the fiscal year 22 amended budget. This is primarily due to decreased funding for capital projects in the water and sewer fund, and funding in the current year budgeted to pay off a bond in stormwater. The enterprise funds total, which includes the budget operations for the operations of the Beach Marina, Air Park, Clearwater Harbor Marina, and Parking Fund, is budgeted at a 67% increase over the amended fiscal year 22 budget. This increase is driven by personnel costs in all funds and increases in the parking fund for chargebacks to support the addition of new police officers assigned to the beach, and the transfer of $10.5 million for the downtown parking garage project. The internal service funds include the budget for information technology, utility customer service, building and maintenance, fleet and radio communications, and the central insurance fund. The budget for internal service funds reflects a 9% increase from the current year's amended budget due to increased insurance expenses in the central insurance fund, and increased fuel and debt costs in the fleet fund, and increased salaries and contract expenses in IT. Special revenue funds include the Special Development Fund, which accounts for restricted revenues that are allocated to capital projects, the Special Program Fund, which is used to account for both revenues and expenditures related to grants and special activities, and other housing assistance funds. Special revenue funds reflect a 33% increase in comparison to the current year's amended budget, and this is due to increased penny funding in capital projects in the upcoming year. And the capital improvement funds reflect a 4% increase from the fiscal year 22 amended budget. This chart represents the change in taxable property values over the last 11 years. Our 2022 certified values received from the Pinellas County Property Appraiser on July 1st reflect an increase in property values of approximately 13.2%, from $13.4 billion in 2021 to $15.2 billion. The proposed millage rate of 5.9550 mils is recommended for the fiscal year 22-23 budget. This is the same rate as was levied in the current year. Due to value growth, this proposed rate is 11.8% greater than the rolled back rate. The rolled back rate is the millage rate that would provide the city with the same property tax revenues as was collected in the prior year. Using this proposed millage rate, property tax revenues are projected to be $86.1 million in fiscal year 23. This represents an increase of approximately $9.3 million, or 13%, over the fiscal year 22 budget. Of this $86.1 million projected, approximately $82 million will support general fund operations, and $4.1 million represents the road millage used for maintenance of city streets. Revenues that support general fund operations reflect a net increase of 3% in comparison to the fiscal year 22 mid-year amended revenues. As discussed on the previous slide, ad valorem tax revenues are budgeted at $82 million, which is a 13% increase over the current year. Intergovernmental revenues are projected to increase by 18% in total. This is the largest revenue source in this category is sales tax, which is budgeted at 33% greater than the current year. Our sales tax revenues have rebounded from COVID and have shown steady growth in the current year and the prior year, and this revenue estimate is based upon these current trends. Charges for service revenues are budgeted at 9% greater than the current year. This is driven by increases in administrative charges and the increased direct charges to the parking fund to cover the cost of the additional police officers. Transfer in revenues are increasing by approximately 9%. This recognizes increased revenues for the administration of housing funds and revenues to reimburse the cost of outside counsel, which is now budgeted in legal. The other revenue category includes building permit fees, fines, interest earnings, and various small miscellaneous revenues. This category is anticipated to increase by 21% in comparison to the current year, and this is primarily due to the increase in building permits and increases in beach rental revenues. This is a chart showing general fund revenues by category. Ad valorem taxes is our largest revenue source at 44% of total revenues. Intergovernmental revenues represent 15.5% of total. Utility taxes are 10%. Franchise and other taxes, 9.5% of total. Charges for services are 9%. Transfer in revenues, 7%, and small miscellaneous revenues account for 4.5% of total general fund revenues. General fund expenditures reflect an increase of 3% across all operations in comparison to the current year's amended budget. The 7% increase in the police budget is related to new FTEs, salary and benefit increases, and increases in internal charges related to radio replacements and new vehicles and fleet charges. In the fire department, this 8% increase is related to salary and benefit increases due to the new contract, increases in internal charges for technology and fleet costs, and increased capital transfers. The budget for Parks and Recreation reflects the transfer of 22 positions to the new Public Works Department, which is offset by the addition of 22.8 new FTEs to support the operations of Imagine Clearwater Coachman Park and the new custodial team. The 13% increase in the library is due to salary and benefit increases, as well as the increased capital transfer for the main library renovations. For Public Works, the prior year budget total represents the current engineering department. For fiscal year 23, this 54% increase is related to the transfer of streets and sidewalks, urban forestry, and the contracts team from Parks and Recreation, as well as the addition of new FTEs. The budget for the non-departmental includes the cost for minor general expenses, property and liability insurance, the transfer to the CRA for the city's share of ad valorem taxes, and transfers to the capital fund for ongoing maintenance projects at general government facilities. For fiscal year 23, this 45% decrease is due to large transfers to capital projects in the current year's amended budget. All other departments as shown on this slide include administrative departments, which includes the new Office of Innovation. The 14% increase is primarily related to the new FTEs and salary and benefit increases. This pie chart also represents general fund expenditures by department. The budget for public safety is 47.5% of the total general fund budget, with the police department representing 29% and the fire department representing 18.5% of that total. The budget for parks and recreation is 21% of total general fund revenues, and the new public works department is now 7% of total. This chart represents the total general fund budget by category. Personnel continues to be our largest expenditure at 60.5% of total. This is down from 63% of total in the current year due to growth in other categories. Operating expenditures are the next largest category, approximately 16% of total. Internal service charges account for the costs associated with information technology, building and maintenance, fleet, risk management, and employee benefits. This represents 12% of the total general fund budget. Interfund transfers represents 10% of the total general fund expenditures, and debt and capital expenditures combined represent approximately 1.5% of the total general fund budget. The growth in this category is due to the debt costs for Imagine Clearwater bonds, which are included in fiscal year 23. Other debt costs include financing for vehicles and equipment for general fund operations, and capital expenditures include the library's book budget and the purchase of small machinery and equipment which meet a capital cost threshold. A total of 1,882.5 full-time equivalent positions are proposed for all funds for fiscal year 23. This is an increase of 33.8 from the fiscal year 22 amended budget. In this graph, the sand-colored portion represents general fund FTEs, which are budgeted at 1,158.4 positions for fiscal year 23. This is an increase of 44.5 positions from the current year's amended budget. In comparison, the green portion represents all other funds. They are budgeted at 724.1 FTEs for fiscal year 23, and this is a decrease of 10.7 FTEs from the current year. These next two slides list FTE changes included in this proposed budget by category. The first category, accountability, includes a total of 8 positions that are being added to enhance financial, operational, or managerial accountability. For the general fund, this includes the addition of an auditor for internal audit, a payroll technician for the fire department, and in planning and development, a review planner and a building plans examiner. In the administrative services fund, a network analyst, senior systems programmer, and a senior business systems analyst are added to IT, and an assistant manager is added for additional field supervision at the marina. The operational efficiency category represents new initiatives and department reorganizations requested by the city manager. A total of 16 FTEs are being requested in the general fund. The Office of Innovation Department is being created with the addition of a Chief Innovation Officer, a Sustainability Specialist, and 3 neighborhood coordinators, which will accompany 2.7 existing positions transferring from the City Manager's office. The new Public Works Department is established with the addition of a Public Works Director and 6 positions to create a right-of-way maintenance team. This new staff, along with 50 positions from the Engineering Department and 22 positions from Parks and Rec, will operate the general fund portions of Public Works. A Human Resources Manager and Human Resources Analyst are being added to HR to enhance citywide training programs. And in the Clerk's Office, the addition of a Grant Coordinator. In Economic Development, a Senior Real Estate Coordinator is added to assist with the coordination and management of real estate transactions. In support of new capital investments completed in the next year, 18.8 positions are added in Parks and Recreation to create programming and provide for the maintenance and beautification of the downtown core, which represents Imagine Clearwater through Cleveland Streetscape to Crest Lake Park. Finally, our last category represents additional staff proposed in relation to new or enhanced levels of service provided, many of which are based on requests from the community. In the general fund, a total of 16.7 positions are added. This includes a librarian and a part-time library assistant to staff opening the North Greenwood Branch Library on Saturdays and earlier opening hours on Fridays. In Parks and Recreation, 4 FTEs are added to create a custodial team to assist with reopening several park restrooms. And the addition of 10 police officers are proposed to support increased service demands related to development and tourism on Clearwater Beach. Also, an increase of 1.2 FTEs for variable police aid hours to provide additional staffing at the Causeway on holidays and peak periods. Level of services increase for other operating funds total 3.3. This includes the addition of a marina parking supervisor who will supervise staff at both marinas and the air park, an additional parking facility aide at the beach marina, and an increase of 0.5 of an FTE to upgrade an existing part-time position, a marine facility operator, to staff peak operating hours at the fuel dock. In the parking fund, an increase of 0.2 of a parking attendant FTE. This is also to upgrade an existing part-time position to full-time, which will support city parking garages and equipment. And in Parks and Recreation, the addition of a part-time, 0.6 of an FTE, recreation leader to support summer and after-school programs, which will be funded by Juvenile Welfare Board grants. These new requests, sorry, I forgot to switch. These new requests total 62.8 FTEs, 55.5 in the general fund, and 7.3 positions to support other operating funds. However, in an effort to identify opportunities for right-sizing the organization and looking for solutions to be conservative with this growth, we've identified 29 positions that are being eliminated due to the inability to staff for more than 1 year. The total on this line also reflect positions which are being moved between operating funds. This reduction in reclass of position results in a net increase of 33.8 FTEs citywide being proposed for fiscal year 23. This slide represents the categorical breakdown for the capital improvement budget funding for fiscal year 23. Projects for utilities, which include stormwater, water and sewer, gas, and solid waste and recycling, are budgeted at $55.8 million. This continues to be our largest expense at approximately 44% of the total capital improvement budget. General government projects are estimated at $32.4 million. This is 26% of total capital funding. This includes projects for police, fire, streets, sidewalks, parks and recreation facilities, libraries, and maintenance of city buildings and facilities that operate general government functions. Significant changes proposed to general government projects include the additional funding of $900,000 from the general fund revenues in the streets and sidewalks project, additional penny funding of $2 million to fund Long Center renovations, and a $1 million increase in general fund for the Long Center as well, and $575,000 for main library renovations. Projects in support of internal service operations are budgeted at $12.7 million, which is 10% of total capital funding. These projects support fleet, radio communications, general services, information technology, and utility customer service. Significant changes to funding in the internal service projects include the increase of approximately $5 million in garage purchase and replacement project due to increased prices, and the addition of new vehicles and equipment which support new FTEs, facilities, and programs. And the capital budget for small enterprise funds is proposed at $24.6 million for fiscal year '23. Significant changes proposed to enterprise fund projects in comparison to the current year include penny funding of $11.5 million for the beach marina upgrade project and $10.5 million for the downtown parking garage. We have scheduled a special work session as an opportunity for you to further discuss the proposed budget with all departments represented. This will be held on Thursday, August 4th at 3 p.m. If there are specific topics that you would like addressed at this meeting, I would ask that you would let the city manager know as soon as possible so we could provide documentation at that meeting. The action requested of you on Thursday is to set the tentative millage rate, which the city manager has proposed at 5.955 mils, and to set the two public hearing dates for September. This information is provided to the county for inclusion in trim notices, which will be mailed to residents in August. Just to note, if you set the tentative millage rate at the proposed 5.955 mils, it can be reduced in September, but it cannot go higher without a first-class mailing at our expense to all residents. Our first public hearing is planned as part of the council meeting on Thursday, September 15th, and the second hearing to adopt the budget will be at a special council meeting scheduled on Thursday, September 29th. Both meetings are scheduled to begin at 6 p.m. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for Ms. Castle? Again, we are only adopting the tentative millage rate, so on Thursday. I will tell you, I've been talking to the city manager. I'm a little bit concerned that we are not rolling back the rate to some extent. Ms. Castle, I would like to have a number. It was nice to have the bar graph on FTEs going back to 2012, but I'd like the actual figures for general fund FTEs. The enterprise funds have been pretty static, and I'd like to see the increase since 2012 in numerical form.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with all the inflation and everything else, we've had a windfall this year. I just believe that we should not be at 5.955. I think our residents deserve some break. That means some work would have to be done on all of our part, but I think it's something that should be considered between now and our budget meeting on the 4th. Vice Mayor.
Well, if we're going to have any discussion, about that, I know the Tampa Bay Times had a editorial yesterday talking about that, and, one of the things I think about when we look at our millage rate that's been the same for the last 7 to 10 years, I took notes on it. How many? 5 years? Is that we have major commitments and obligations that we have to meet. I mean, we have major construction going on in Clearwater. As our city manager said, I think we have at least 5 major hotels going up on Clearwater Beach. We have the $4 million plus development on our Bluff property, possibly. We have $90 million park and amphitheater going up. We're in the process of designing our new city hall and revamping our municipal services building. We have a backlog that we're working on and making great progress on our streets and sidewalk repair. Our residents want their park bathrooms open and activated. Our residents want more follow-through with code enforcement. We have increasing costs related to cybersecurity and effective communications. We have annexations into our city every single meeting. We continue to grow. We have been woefully understaffed. So where this is asking for 39.8, how many staff opening? 33.8. I think earlier this spring, we had a report of 170 openings, unfilled positions from part-time camp counselors all the way up to utility engineers. We are not competitive with our surrounding municipalities in salary. We struggle, as other municipalities do, with hiring and retention. I mean, we have big challenges. And I think, we need to keep the millage where it is. And one of the points that was made in that editorial in Sunday's paper is that, people who are homesteaded have a 3% cap on how much their property taxes would increase per year. And that when these new people come in and are buying up housing and bidding over asking price, cash, no inspections, I mean, those are exactly the people who should be paying an increase. If they can afford to do that, then they can, pay that higher. That's part of where our revenue is coming from as well. The other thing, just to tuck away, is I had a planning meeting for the Suncoast League of Cities on Saturday, talking about what possible legislative priorities might be, and also talking about this candidates summit that we're going to have and possible questions. And one of them was, for state legislators, is like, if you're going to offer these benefits to different groups that affect our ad valorem taxes, tax breaks for first responders or police or whatever, that unfunded mandates. How are we going to make up for that? And those things happen all the time. And so that's a cut into our revenue that we have zero control over. So one of the questions for candidates would be, if you want to propose that at the state level, how are you going to offset that for cities to make our budgets work?
They never have.
Yeah, I'm sure.
In the 20 years I've been involved, that's why they're called unfunded mandates.
But it
Because
affects
they never
us,
fund them.
Yeah.
So,
So those were just my thoughts that I jotted down as we had this discussion, but, I support keeping it where it is.
we have a lot of inequities. I know you said that the people that just moved here, should be paying more of the freight. Well, they do, because they can move into a neighborhood where there are houses that are exactly the same, and they can be paying 4 to 5 times as much. The police show up in the same amount of time, they get the same parks, the same recreation centers, and the same libraries. I don't know, there's not many entities that you see that are getting, 12% increases in their budgets. So I think we have to be mindful of that. When did I first bring back talking about a rollback, Mr. Jennings? It wasn't yesterday, was it?
Oh, no, this is from,
So this doesn't have squat to do with the St. Pete Times' editorial.
Well, no, I mean, I just
I just
a
want to
little
make that
context.
really clear. So, Mr. Bunker?
I wouldn't be for an increase in the millage, but I don't think we should be rolling it back either at this point. Our new city manager has a lot of ambitious tasks to improve the city, and I think we should support them. Everything that has been laid out makes sense. We're going to need more police on the beach. We're going to need people working in the park. We got to have people cleaning all those restrooms we're opening. I don't think now is the time to be trimming back.
Well, I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of the budget because that's not the purpose today. I've got some strong feelings about the restrooms. I'll be glad to talk about that because, no offense, but along comes a pharaoh who does not know. And, I'd also point out, another biblical parable. You often you store up resources in times of plenty because there will become times of need. And when we're fully utilizing everything that's coming in, when we have resources, it's a lot tougher. Just look at the FTEs back to 2012. And we were actually coming out of the recession and adding some. But other comments or questions? We're going to talk about this on Thursday, so. Okay, thank you, Ms. Castle. 5.1.
Approve the City of Clearwater's fiscal year 2022-23 annual action plan.
Thank you. Chuck Lane, Economic Development and Housing Department. In 2020, Council approved our 5-year consolidated plan. That establishes our goals and objectives with the use of federal funds, specifically Community Development Block Grant Funds and Home Investment Partnership Program Funds. We're required to submit an annual action plan for each year of the CON plan, outlining proposed projects and activities. This will be the 3rd annual action plan of the current consolidated plan. Total funds include the allocations for the current year, prior year funds carrying over, and anticipated program income expected throughout the plan year. The total CDBG funds is $2,896,877. Total home funds available in FY 22-23 is $4,480,489. With CDBG, our focus is on public facility improvements, public services, economic development programs, and limited housing activities. New construction of housing is not an eligible use of CDBG funds. We're planning 7 public facility projects totaling $618,107. 6 of them are with nonprofit partners who provide services ranging from homeless prevention, housing services, and other community-oriented programs. The other project is a city project to build a new children's playground at Ross Norton Recreation Center. Our plan proposes funding 7 public service providers with services such as family-oriented programs, substance abuse, assistance for the elderly, homeless services, pregnancy resources, assistance to those with developmental disabilities. For the record, I need to make a change to the budget spreadsheet that's included in this agenda item. As you know, we recently learned that Hope Villages of America is closing its doors to Grace House. We're going to withdraw their application for salary support. There'll be an updated budget spreadsheet with the agenda item on Thursday. Funding is very limited for public services. We're only able to commit 15% of our annual allocation, which it calculates at $134,621. It's very competitive, so we rely on scoring criteria. Those with the highest scores receive the highest allocation of $17,437 each. Second tier receives $15,693, and those with the lowest scores receive $10,462 each. We set aside $30,000 for 2 partners to provide homebuyer education counseling to Clearwater homebuyers. We also fund 2 organizations $50,000 each to provide technical assistance to micro-enterprise and small business owners. We use a limited amount of CDBG for acquisition and housing rehab. Most of it, we do that with our revolving loan funds. And of course, we're able to use 20% of our allocation towards administration, which primarily funds staff salaries. For home funds, we're limited to, those funds are limited to producing and preserving housing units. We have some multifamily housing projects lined up, as you know. We have 2 in downtown. I'll be presenting a surplus opportunity at our next meeting for a multifamily project in Lake Bellevue. We also budget for a wide range of housing projects. Example, we budget funds for multifamily land acquisition. We don't have a specific project in mind, but if a partner comes to us with a request, we can't participate if it's not in our budget. So what we do, we try to create a budget that allows us to be flexible while still remaining compliant with HUD regulations. As I said earlier, we have about $4.48 million in home funding. We rarely spend down the entire amount in a budget year. It would leave us incapable of responding to a worthwhile project that might come in the door. However, we are required to budget 100% of those funds in the next 12 months. Lastly, the home program allows us to use 10% of the allocation for administration and 5% of program income. I'll take questions, please.
Questions for Mr. Lane?
I have
Vice
some
Mayor.
questions. Yeah. Thank you, Chuck. As we look at the attachment with the 2022-23 allocations, I had a few questions about, did the Neighborhood Affordable Housing Advisory Board have much discussion on these proposed expenditures?
Yes, they approved the staff recommended allocations, and then more recently they approved that, and more recently they recommended council approval of the annual action plan, which contains this budget.
But was there a lot of discussion about? I wasn't able to attend that Tuesday
I went through
meeting.
each line item with them, and we discussed it. There wasn't a lot of questions. I don't think there was
Okay.
any negative feedback at all.
Okay. I have a question about that $95,000 allocated to the Ross Norton Playground. How did you arrive at that figure, and were people in the neighborhood consulted? And do we usually allocate the CDBG funds for park improvement?
Yeah, we've done that. Belmont Park is a perfect example.
Okay.
We put a similar amount into that. We have the ability to do that and with CDBG, and it's a good way to offset some general fund money as well, and it reaches a lot of people. A lot of people have used those parks, and those improvements are worthwhile.
I agree, they're worthwhile. I'm just wondering, with our demands for housing and housing services that we pull from CDBG for,
CDBG is a tough one with housing, because you can't.
because it's
can't build-
public facilities
You
improvement.
can't build housing with CDBG. So it's mostly programs, public services, and public facilities.
But could it be for like St. Vincent de Paul to add a couple more showers? Would that fall under facilities improvements for
Yeah,
CDBG?
we are improving, making improvements to St. Vincent de Paul. And there are others, Directions for Living, HEP. These are organizations we typically do public facility improvements with.
Did we fund at 100% of the requests for those CDBG funds?
The maximum request is $90,000 for a public facilities project. The extra $5,000 is for administrative costs for
I
oversight.
saw that. Okay. And then, so the Grace House closing, it's got a dollar figure here of like $10,462. Can we allocate that to like Gulf Coast Legal for?
What we did is we eliminated that, and we recalculated the scoring, the allocations based on the scoring. So the top three got a certain amount, the next two got a certain amount, the next two got a certain amount. So we just put all the money back in and redid the math.
You spread the peanut butter.
Yeah. What we do throughout the course of the year, if there's a public service provider that's not going to spend all the funds, we can pull it and redistribute it to someone that has spent down their funds quicker than expected. That's the practice as well.
Okay, on page 2, we've got new construction of downtown rental housing project for $1,385,000. Which downtown rental project is that?
That was for the Blue Sky project, but it's now available for other projects in downtown.
Okay, so it's still there though, right? I mean, you've got it,
It's still there, but there are other needs with the other projects, it seems.
okay. Under the housing pool, new construction rehab, you've got owner-occupied rehab is here. Does this mean that we don't have any owner-occupied rehab under revolving loan funds? That's at the bottom of this page. So those owner-occupied rehab, we don't have any allocated, it's on page 3. It looks like there's no CDBG or home funds for owner-occupied rehab.
We use a lot of SHIP money with that, and we do use home. I'm trying to see the line item you're finding.
Okay. It's on the 3rd page. It kind of carries over from the bottom of the 2nd, but revolving loan funds, because I think revolving loan funds are a good thing to have, right? I mean, but I was just kind of surprised not to see.
Owner-occupied rehabilitation, we do have some CDBG budgeted. More than likely, we'll use the home money ahead of that, and we have SHIP money as well, and revolving loan funds, so it's there.
Okay. I didn't know what CHDO set aside. What is CHDO?
SHODO, Community Housing Development Organization.
Okay.
It's HUD's way of asking us to partner with local, small, community-based housing organizations.
Okay. And then we have for tenant-based rental assistance, we've got $321,400. What's the demand for tenant-based rental assistance?
That is something, I'll clarify that with the budget sheet on Thursday. That is a request from the Clearwater Housing Authority to help get deposit payments and things like that, help people get into housing. So specifically for them to utilize over the next 12 months.
Is that their full ask that we're fully funding?
That was their full ask.
Do you have any idea if they have more need?
If they do and there's funds available, we can adjust.
Okay. And so I would ask them, Clearwater Housing Authority, for their data on what the needs are and and is it all up to them to communicate with our residents about the tenant-based rental assistance?
Well, they're working with their clients, so it is, the lion's share of it is. I mean, we can certainly make mention of it on our website as well and some of our outreach.
I mean, if we know that people are really struggling, my question and concern is, are we communicating to them that there is tenant-based rental assistance available through the Clearwater Housing Authority? And if so, you know, is there going to be a stampede there? Is there going to be a big need, and do we need to better fund it? That's just what I want to understand, you know. And then on the last page, what do we have in mind for property acquisition and demolition? Is that just like the old Elks, it's 255?
Well, it's nothing right now, no project, well, we're gonna use funding for the Elks Lodge, yes. That's proposed for demolition. We don't have any other projects in mind, but those types of things come up. Sometimes, you know, demolishing a structure on a piece of property is prohibitive of a nonprofit buying that piece of property because of that expense.
Right.
So we can assist it, you know.
So it's like a placeholder, pretty much, but we...
Yeah, we can't, if we don't have it budgeted as a line item, we can't do that activity.
Okay. And then, you know, that remaining balance carryover into fiscal year 22, 23, I was surprised to see there's no numbers there? We've got funding totals, but no carryover?
And which funding source?
On the very last
Row.
row, there's nothing there.
Page 3.
On page 3.
Okay, that's, what I've done from the columns, I've taken out CDBG, CV, and Home ARP, and that's what that column is. I'll be presenting a CDBG substantial amendment in the next few weeks, so you'll see that entire line item. The Home ARP, you've seen that in our substantial amendment more recently. Some of that's been turned upside down because a good portion of that money was going to Blue Sky. So we're going to have some of that money available as well. But I took that out because it's not applicable to the annual action plan specifically.
And then one last thing about the CAPER, you know, because you're required to allocate these funds, right? And put them in a column in a spreadsheet somewhere, whether we're going to really use all 255, 574 for demolition and property acquisition. A lot of that reporting data on the CAPER looks abysmal, right? And so is there a better way or an addendum or additional attachment that we can provide, that you can provide to me as well as residents to report back that, you know, we have better outcomes than, you know, public facilities improvement for homeless to affect 5,800 homeless, HEP planned 800 planned and 0 completed, Salvation Army 5,000 planned, 0 completed, was on a CAPER. You know, that doesn't look good, but it's all about context.
It's all about context, and those numbers, we couldn't report any of them because the project carried over to the next.
Didn't complete.
Those people were being helped.
Yeah.
What we can do is do a better job in our CAPER in the narrative sections.
Yeah.
But I think to your point, what we're doing right now is we're preparing something to put on our website, something that we can update once a month to show the activity, the volume, give people an idea of what we're accomplishing out there. That's something that me and my staff are working on right now. We're going to run it by Mr. Jennings, make sure he's comfortable with it, and this is at his direction. So it's something he needs to be comfortable with. So that's in process right now.
Thanks.
Any other questions that have not been covered? All right, 5.2.
Declare surplus for the purpose of sale for development of affordable housing, real property located at 1408 Monroe Avenue.
Okay, last month, council approved a list of city-owned properties that may be suitable for development of affordable housing. The state requires that we maintain this list. There are 2 properties on that list that are vacant, single-family lots. So recently, the Economic Development Housing Department created a procedure for transferring these lots to affordable housing developers for the construction of single-family homes. Mr. Jennings approved the procedure as a transparent and competitive process for transferring these types of lots. This procedure does not apply to multifamily development opportunities. Under the procedure, we invited developers to participate in the program. 3 nonprofit developers responded and submitted the required documentation to be on our list of pre-approved developers. Anyone on that list is notified every time the city is considering transferring a single-family home lot that is suitable for affordable housing. Developer applications for a lot are reviewed by a property disposition committee under the program, and that committee is comprised of our planning and development director, our city clerk, the chair of our neighborhood and affordable housing advisory board, and myself. The Committee reviews the scoring and makes a recommendation as to the successful applicant. That recommendation is then vetted by the NAHAB. They make their own recommendation, and I present that to council. That's where we are today on this lot. 1408 Monroe Ave is the first parcel to go through this process. The Property Disposition Committee and the NAHAB both are recommending transfer of the property to Clearwater Neighborhood Housing Services, doing business as Tampa Bay Neighborhood Housing Services. They were one of two developers that tied for the highest score. The determining factor is a unique aspect to the site. The site is only 36 feet wide. Tampa Bay Neighborhood Housing Services is under contract to purchase the lot immediately to the north. They plan to combine the two lots into a single buildable lot for one single-family home. They also plan to build another home on the same block concurrently, so they may realize some economies of scale. Staff's value opinion of the lot is $29,900. The contract has a sales price of $7,500. Those funds will be used to fund additional future affordable housing efforts. The city's done a lot of good things over the several decades with this organization, and although their leadership has changed, I expect that to continue. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Any questions from Mr. Lane? Vice Mayor?
Yeah, so the developer combining the two parcels for a more desirable site, it's still just for one single-family home?
Yes, 36-foot wide lot is just very, very challenging.
Okay.
Very challenging.
And then it can't be for multifamily? We can't do a duplex or some kind of triplex thing there?
No, this is the proposal that we got. We weren't seeking a proposal for a duplex. We had control of one lot, and that's really all we could require.
Okay. And then, one thing that I thought about when I read this is that I think you're probably aware that, because I did the grant review last Friday for the COC, but CASA and PERC are looking for approximately 1 acre of land in North County to build a 13 tiny homes, and 12 would be designated for domestic violence survivors in transition, and 1 would be for staff and people on site working with them. And so there's a big need for North County to have that. They're looking for an acre of land, and they already have funding for the tiny homes. So it's a project that's ready to go. The grant was approved last year, and we had a renewal this past Friday, but they don't have any data to report because they don't have the land yet. So an acre seems pretty big when you're talking about these dimensions, but do we have anything available?
I've met with both of them for that
Yeah.
exact reason.
Yeah.
Talk about what the city might have available. And right now, we just don't have anything that's suitable for that kind of project. That's one of the hardest things in Clearwater is finding dirt.
I know. Well, they're looking unincorporated because, and we've got all those unincorporated areas, but it's hard. Thanks, Chuck.
Any other questions? All right, we're going to take a 7-minute recess. We'll reconvene the work session. We are on item 6.1.
Amend Clearwater Code of Ordinances, Chapter 2, regarding the disposal and disposition of surplus tangible personal property.
Good morning, Mayor and council members. Jay Ravens, Finance Director. This item is a request to approve amendments to the purchasing and the disposal of surplus sections of the Code of Ordinances. Probably the most significant change is updating the minimum purchase threshold requiring competitive quotes from the current level of $2,500 to $10,000. The $2,500 amount was established in 2001, over 20 years ago. In light of rising costs and supply shortages, we are currently recommending the $10,000 level to help expedite procurement for departments citywide. Similarly, the city manager's authorization level for disposal of surplus assets has been capped at $5,000 for more than 20 years. We are requesting this level be increased to $50,000. Dispositions in excess of $50,000 will continue to be brought to the council for approval. Other minor changes include updating the requirements for performance and payment bonds to mirror state statute, consistent with the city's current purchasing policy. Clarification that contracts for commodities should not normally exceed 5 years, and other minor non-substantive updates to ordinance terminology. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Ravens? Vice Mayor.
Does the change in purchasing and disposal and disposition of surplus tangible personal property, those changes seem reasonable to me. I was just wondering, how is that, or is it, and how is it communicated to the council and the public for transparency? Are those just behind-the-scenes operational things that aren't reported out in any way?
Your exposure to it would be the budget process in approving the budget, but yeah, those items, because they're budgeted and below the council requirement for approval, would be underneath the surface for you.
Okay. So there's no tab that some resident who wants to get into the weeds would, they'd have to specifically ask for something like that?
Sure, if they asked for a record of what we've paid vendors
Okay.
in general over the past year, that would include all purchases.
Okay, thanks.
So the disposal, I mean, that's a tenfold increase. Where did the number,
Well,
was it derived from? That isn't inflation, for heaven's sakes.
No, the 5,000 to 50,000, it was the issue of the city manager has authority to approve purchases up to 100,000. That $5,000 threshold just seemed to be somewhat arbitrarily low, that if we were disposing of something, of equipment that totaled $5,200 worth of value, that item had to come to council. We really thought this is something council would be receptive to, because we bring a lot of really relatively small items to you for disposals that are much less than the threshold the city manager typically has for approval.
We don't get those lists very often, though. I mean, it's periodic. I don't know if it's that onerous.
We try
I
to
don't mind
avoid,
increasing it, but
avoid bringing
tenfold
those to you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember some long discussions about it. Okay, we'll talk about it further on Thursday. 7.1.
Accept a gas utility easement from Broker Creek 5 LLC.
Good morning, Council. Alex Leon with the Engineering Manager with the Gas Department. So for this first item, with your acceptance, this will allow us to extend our pipeline by approximately 600 feet and allow us to serve our commercial customers.
Any questions?
I just have, thanks. One, do you know what kind of businesses for 7.1 and 7.2 are going in there that want those easements? Just curious.
I do not know the type of business. I do know that they're installing generators as well as air conditioning units for a large warehouse.
Okay. The first one is a large warehouse?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
Consent?
Yes.
7.2.
This is
Accept the gas utility easement from MHC County Place LLC.
So this is a similar item as well. This will allow us to extend our line by approximately 1,000 feet. And this will allow us to serve this community to provide gas heaters for the pools and their spas.
Questions? Consent?
Yeah.
8.1.
Thank you.
Thank
Approve the
you.
conveyance of a distribution easement to Duke Energy for property located at 401 North McMullen Booth Road.
Morning, Mayor, council members. Suzanne Kramer, Real Estate Services Coordinator. Parks and Rec is in the process of a multi-million-dollar renovation project at Del Oro Park. Duke is going to be installing facilities to serve the new tennis courts and restroom building. The distribution easement will provide Duke with the property rights necessary to construct and maintain its electric equipment within the easement. The facilities will be located in areas that are agreed to between the city and Duke. After Duke installs their equipment, the city will survey the exact area where the electrical facilities are installed and provide a descriptive legal description, which will be Exhibit A, to the distribution easement. And once that's finalized, the distribution easement will be recorded in public records. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Just-
Vice Mayor?
Has there been any discussion with Duke about laying EV infrastructure there at that park?
I would have to defer to the Parks and Rec person who's managing the project.
Okay.
I can find out.
Yeah, you could just email or something. I just think while they're doing all that infrastructure, might as well get it EV ready or capable.
I'll ask them to reach out to you about that.
Mr. Jennings, are you not going to be bringing forward an RFP for EV so the city isn't doing it?
Yes, we
There's a
are.
lot of companies that are doing this because they're making money.
Exactly. So, in working with Synergistic at this point, but we'll be bringing that RFP forward in the very near future.
Okay. Consent?
Yeah.
8.2.
Approve a purchase order Workscapes LLC for the purchase and installation of office furniture at Clearwater Police Department District 3 Operations and Training Center.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Jennings. Good morning, Mayor and Council. Ivan Dimitrov, Engineering Department. Sorry, my first time. This purchase order is for the purchase and installation of furniture at the new Clearwater PD District 3 Training and Ops Center. The furniture was selected by Clearwater PD and the assistance of the project design team and furniture vendor. The proposal piggybacks off the State of Florida furniture contract. Any questions?
Any questions? Consent?
Thank you.
See, that was easy.
Thank you.
8.3.
Approve an interlocal agreement between Pinellas County, the town of Bel Air, and the cities of Bel Air Beach, Bel Air Bluffs, Clearwater, Dunedin, Indian Rocks Beach, Largo, Seminole, and Tarpon Springs for a fund match for a Southwest Florida Water Management District Cooperative Funding Initiative Grant.
Good morning, Elliot Shrubbery, the Engineering Assistant Director. The city participated in a comprehensive conservation management plan with the county in the past to analyze St. Joseph Sound and the water quality and what's coming back and what we can do better. This item is for a grant from the, this is committing us to pay $34,692 to Pinellas County in the future. The county received a grant for $200,000 from SwiftMud to fund half of the study update, which will be $400,000. There's a lot of other partners that are involved in the city, in Pinellas County at different amounts each, but the project will include review of the existing data, targeted water quality sampling, and best management practice. This is just committing us to pay the $34,000 at the moment. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Is there any way the opening of Hurricane Pass could be included in this?
Hurricane Pass.
If you want to improve water
Hurricane
quality.
Pass is still slightly open. It's the Clearwater Pass we need to do.
Clearwater Pass.
Yeah. Hurricane Pass is choking up a lot too. It's half the size it used to be.
That's a no?
I doubt it.
Consent? Yes. 9.1.
Approve the annexation initial future land use map designation of residential low and initial zoning atlas designation of low medium density residential for a property located at 2843 at St. John Drive.
Thank you, Colleague Rutherton, Planning and Development. This voluntary annexation petition involves a 0.195 acre property consisting of one parcel of land occupied by a detached dwelling. The applicants are requesting annexation in order to receive sanitary sewer and solid waste service from the city. The applicants have paid the required sewer impact fee and assessment fees in full and are aware of the additional costs to extend the city sewer service to the property. And solid waste will be provided upon annexation.
Any questions? 9.2.
Approve the annexation initial future land use map designation of residential urban initial zoning atlas designation of low medium density residential district for 1221 Sunset Point Road.
Thank you. So this voluntary annexation petition involves a 0.137 acre property consisting of one parcel of land occupied by a new single-family dwelling which is currently under construction. The property is located on the south side of Sunset Point, approximately 385 feet east of Douglas Avenue. Applicant is requesting annexation in order to receive sanitary sewer, water, and solid waste service from the city. The need for sanitary sewer and water service was prompted by the applicant's proposal to construct a single-family dwelling on a previously vacant lot. Due to timing issues, the applicant has started construction of the single-family dwelling in Pinellas County, and due to the ongoing construction, Planning and Development Department will schedule a second and final hearing upon the certificate of occupancy being issued.
Any questions? 9.3.
Approve the annexation initial future land use map designation of residential urban and initial zoning atlas designation of low medium density residential district for 1219 Sunset Point Road.
Thank you. So this voluntary annexation petition involves a 0.137 acre property consisting of one parcel of land which is occupied by a new single-family dwelling which has recently come under construction. The applicant is requesting annexation in order again to receive sanitary sewer, solid waste, and water service from the city. And similar to the property before, the need for sanitary sewer and water service was prompted by the applicant's proposal to construct a single-family dwelling on the site. Again, the applicant has recently started construction on this property, so the Planning and Development Department will be continuing second reading until we receive the certificate of occupancy.
Questions? 9.4.
Approve a future land use map amendment from residential office general to institutional for the property located at 905 South Highland Avenue.
Good morning, Dylan Prentice, Planning and Development. This future land use map amendment involves a 1.86 acre vacant property located on the east side of South Highland Avenue, approximately 450 feet south of Druid Road. The parcel is owned by the YMCA of the Suncoast and is currently vacant. However, the property was previously occupied by a nursing home that was demolished in 2006. YMCA of the Suncoast would like the option to construct a new smaller facility to replace their current one on the parcel directly to the south, which has been sold to the Learning Independence for Tomorrow School. This amendment would allow the applicant to develop the property with a facility built for delivery of social and public services, although no plans have been submitted at this time. The request is to change the future land use map designation of the property from residential office general to institutional. Presently, the property is abutted to the institutional future land use designation to the north, east, and south. Residential uses do not directly abut the property, with South Highland Avenue serving as a buffer to the west. The proposed change would potentially decrease the demand on several public facilities, but would potentially see an increase in solid waste and traffic generation. However, this will not result in the degradation of the current levels of service for solid waste and streets. The Community Development Board unanimously recommended this case for approval at its June 21st hearing, and Planning and Development is recommending approval. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Okay. 9.5 is companion.
Approve a zoning atlas amendment from the office district to the institutional district for a property located at 905 South Highland Avenue.
This is the companion zoning atlas amendment case to the future land use map amendment that was previously presented. The request is to change the zoning atlas designation from the office district to the institutional district. Again, the property is abutted to the institutional zoning district to the north, east, and south, and residential uses do not directly abut the property. The Community Development Board unanimously recommended this case for approval at its June 21st hearing, and Planning and Development is recommending approval. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Right now, the Y has moved some of their work down to the Highland Bel Air shopping plaza. If they don't use this site, it would either go to Lyft or Salvation Army, most likely. So, all right, 9.6.
Approve a development agreement between the City of Clearwater and Gotham Property Acquisitions LLC and the D'Annunzio Group, providing for the redevelopment of two sites on the west side of Osceola Avenue, abutting Coachman Park in the downtown core.
Good
morning, Gina Clayton, Planning and Development. I'm really excited to be here this morning to present to you the development agreement for the redevelopment of 2 city-owned bluff properties that are really key to our downtown revitalization. After the failed referendum back in 2000, the city continued to believe in the strategic nature of these sites and called for their redevelopment in the 2004 Downtown Redevelopment Plan. In 2017, the Imagine Clearwater Downtown Waterfront Vision Plan also recognized the value of these properties in creating an active edge adjacent to the waterfront park that was envisioned in the plan in a way to draw people to the park, better connect it, the waterfront down to the downtown core, and also just create a safer environment through having lots of people in the area. In May of this year, the city issued a call for development concepts for the former City Hall and Harborview sites, which garnered 3 proposals. And after you all reviewed them and had presentations, you voted to enter into negotiations with the Gotham Property Acquisitions LLC and the D'Annunzio Group to move forward with the development agreement. And while the call for development only included 2 parcels, you'll see on the map that the library parking lot is included in this agreement to provide access only to Harborview and the library parking. I want to be clear that this property will be retained by the city and is not part of the property to be disposed of. The Gotham D'Annunzio proposal, which is represented up on the screen, calls for a mix of uses to increase apartments in the area so we have more full-time residents in downtown, to bring in a hotel that will have a steady flow of visitors, and commercial uses to attract people. The proposal will bridge the gap that has existed historically between the waterfront and the heart of the downtown, and along with the park will bring people to our downtown. So what I'd like to do is walk you through each of the site plans that are represented on this drawing so that you can fully understand what is being proposed. So I'd like to start with the Harborview site. It's a 1.34 acre parcel, and the proposal includes 2 building and significant underground parking. I want to be clear that there is parking on grade, but it is concealed from view, and there's also underground parking as well. There is a north building, and that includes a 158-unit hotel that's 13 stories and high, up to a maximum of 157 feet. And at this time, the specific brand is not known, but we do know that they'll have amenities such as a rooftop pool, business center, that sort of thing, along with a conference center space. There'll be approximately 9,000 square feet of commercial uses in the hotel building on the 1st and 2nd floor, but those will be operated independently from the hotel. The south building, which will be much smaller in scale and will not exceed 53 feet in height, is in line with the wrap that has commercial and townhouses with the Water's Edge building. And that is anticipated to include 12,000 square feet of commercial space, such as retail, food and beverage uses, and an event space. The garage will have a total of 169 parking spaces concealed from view to accommodate the code requirements, as well as 50 parking spaces that will be dedicated or reserved and allocated to the city. The density of the hotel is 124 units per acre, where the code allows 95. At the time of site plan approval, the developers will have to submit for a 36-unit request from the Public Amenities Incentive Pool. This is a program operated and decided by the Community Development Board, and we will be supporting that application. The proposed FAR of 0.36 is well within what is otherwise permitted.
Bless you.
As you can see on the site plan, the building that's on the left side of the screen is the hotel, and it will have a lobby that fronts on Osceola. Additionally, there'll be commercial space that fronts the street and the plaza area between the hotel and the commercial building which is located on the right of the screen, and that building has uses fronting on Osceola as well as the Civic Gateway of Coachman Park. And as you can see from the site plan, if you look on the left side of the plan, you will see that there is site access provided through that library parking lot, and there will be a loading area undercover in that location as well. The conceptual landscaping plan illustrates the significant amount of publicly accessible space, which equals almost half of an acre of this 1.34 acre property. The areas are located, as you can see on the drawing, around the perimeter of the site, both on the south and the north side, as well as through the center of the site. These areas will be dedicated for outdoor dining, public gathering, and pedestrian access to the park. As you can see from the elevations, the proposal has a modern urban architectural design, and it includes a balance of glass and stucco and wood, and it works together to create an attractive project. A sloped roof covered with grass and seating provides a space that will be between the site at grade and the rooftop of the commercial building, and that will add a unique concept that has an interesting design from the view of the park into the site. The site layout of the two buildings really blurs the lines between public and private realm, and also creates view corridors through the site and maximizes views to the water. The building placement also has been something that has been studied, and it has been cited in a way to help ensure some views through the site from properties that are located across the street. And the last thing that I'll highlight about this project is that they intend to construct LEED Silver equivalent standards, use LID stormwater techniques, and will have a limited number of EV charging. And at this point, I don't know the exact number, but we will work that out as we move forward. This is a rendering which gives you an idea of how the project might look from Osceola next to the Civic Gateway, and then this one is from the park looking into the site. Just to note, these are renderings. These are not the actual design, so they could be a little different when, or it might look a little different when it's constructed. So does anyone have any questions before we move on to City Hall?
Any questions for Ms. Clayton at this time?
All right, so on to City Hall. This is the larger of the two sites. It's 2.6 acres and one building is proposed. It is a mixed-use project with a large residential component that includes two high-rise towers on a large podium with parking located mostly underground and concealed from grade. The project is proposed to have a maximum of 600 attached dwelling units along with typical residential amenities and 40,000 square feet of commercial uses such as retail, food and beverage, and cultural uses. The apartment lobby and amenities, as well as commercial space, will be located in that podium on the first 1 and 2 levels. The building will have 27 stories, and will not exceed 289 feet in height. This is a project density of 253 units per acre, where 95 is permitted, and the FAR 0.35 is well within what is allowed. Again, at the time of site plan review, they will need to make a request from the Public Amenities Incentive Pool, which will be decided by the CDB. As you can see on the site plan, commercial uses are located on the northeastern section of the building closest to South Osceola, which is at the top of your screen. And as you move south, which would be down along Osceola, you'll see that the south tower is set back and creates some openness on the site to provide entry focal point to the building. It provides separation between two towers and preserves a couple of trees there at the intersection of Pierce and Osceola. The portion of the building closest to Pierce will likely be occupied by residential amenities, but there could be commercial if they find that works. And there will be a space, as you can see in the drawing, for a vehicular drop-off area, and there will be a plaza between the building, the parking area, and the street. The garage entry is located near the southwest corner of the site. which is here, and is concealed from the park's view, and there's a raised amenity space for residents with the pool on the back side of the building overlooking the park. This plan, I think, illustrates a significant amount of space incorporated into the site design for public plaza along South Osceola to the corner of Pierce, and then a landscaped retail corridor located on the north side of this site, adjacent to the water's edge property that connects all the way down to the park, and you can see that on the right side of the screen. There will be landscape terracing with sidewalks and seating incorporated into the west side of the property adjacent to the park that will allow for walking between the park and this property. Approximately 1.36 acres of the 2.6 acre site can be used by the public. The other design feature that I wanted to point out here is in the middle of the building. On the podium, they're proposed to have a green roof. As you can see from the elevation, this proposal has a modern coastal design that incorporates the use of glass, stucco, and aluminum. The building mass is mitigated by locating the towers at angles on the podium and creating a large view corridor through the site. And like Harbor View, these buildings will also be constructed to LEED Silver. Equivalent standards incorporate LID techniques and include EV charging. Here's a rendering of how that public plaza might look along the South Osceola frontage. And then this illustrates that entry into the landscaped retail corridor proposed on the north side of this site. Any questions about City Hall?
Questions? Councilmember Albritton.
Yeah, I noticed, I know before when we were talking about this, some of the exact figures were approximate, like with the hotel. I mean, we have 158 key, represents rooms, but you don't have an approximate on that. You got a fixed number, and then on the City Hall proposal, you've got between 500 and 600 attached. That seemed like a big spread for the apartments.
Right, and so after the referendum discussion, you had used the words approximately, and so there has been discussions about how to define what we mean and what is the least amount that we, from the city standpoint, will consider as appropriate and legally within what our city attorney would be comfortable with. So we have established at this point 500 units. So that's why I included the range on the slide. Our goal clearly is 600. That's what they presented to us. And I'll just defer to our city attorney in case he wants to add.
But that's a minimum threshold is 500.
Correct.
We still could get a critical mass.
Yes, absolutely.
Of new residents. Mr. Margolis.
Yeah, that's right. It's hard to pin down an exact number at this stage because it's so early in the process. There are going to be architectural reasons as well as financing reasons why there may need to be some variation in it. Mr. Pickett had specifically asked for permission to go as low as 500. To be candid, that's a little lower than I would like. However, I do believe if push comes to shove, I could probably defend 500 within the meaning of approximately 600, considering the fact that there are architectural unknowns as well as financing unknowns. 500 is the number that we settled on, however, as a minimum. To the mayor's point, if at any time during pre-development or otherwise, we learn that this project is actually going to be fewer than 500 units, I have preserved to the city the ability to withdraw from the project, which is absolutely crucial to fulfill council's expectations for the density and the residents that you're looking to bring downtown.
Okay.
Vice Mayor.
I had a question, Gina, about they're proposing a green roof on the City Hall sites. What does that mean? What does that look like?
It's a roof that is vegetated, basically. You have all kinds of plants, and it is designed to, create, I don't want to say a forested area, but a highly landscaped area.
Okay. I've been on those. I just wanted to know that it was it's gonna be accessible to people. They're not just gonna put shrubs up there and people don't go up there. I mean, it's,
I don't really have the answer to that. I mean, some green roofs are for people to
Just
be
for
on,
them,
and
yeah.
some maybe not so much, so I would defer to the team about that.
I just wonder about the environmental benefit of, shrubbery that's up there that isn't accessible for enjoyment of residents versus solar that's, I know is I don't know the data about what's better per square foot. Is it better to put solar panels up there for the benefit of the environment, or is it better to have these plants that absorb carbon and all that, especially if you don't have a component of the public enjoying it? You know what I mean? So if it's gonna be an amenity for people who live there and it's green and they can go out and picnic and, enjoy the fresh air, that's one thing.
My guess, the majority of them I have seen have public access.
No.
But I'm not sure, but there are a lot that do and there are some that don't. I just toured one over in Water Street that was really kind of envisioned as a forest, so.
So when I went up, when I was in New York and I took the opportunity to visit Gotham West, I went up on the rooftop. So they have, literally grass up there, which was surprising to me. It wasn't AstroTurf and furniture and everything else for the residents.
Was it on pretty much the entire part or just a section? Because
No,
I
the
see
whole
air
roof.
conditioning things up there. I mean,
Whole
okay.
roof. I'll send the pictures to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, this is so conceptual at this standpoint, we just don't have those details, and it will evolve through the design process, but perhaps Thursday night, they could tell you what their intentions are.
Yeah, I just, again, I think it's public property. We want to be leaders with environmental initiatives and sustainability, and we want to push for the biggest impact. And if there's a bigger impact with solar versus, green, and we're not factoring in enjoyment of residents as some, non-quantifiable benefit, it's just want to understand that.
Okay. All right, should I go on?
Yes.
All right, so staff believes these projects are consistent with the comprehensive plan and the city's downtown redevelopment goals and are generally consistent with the downtown district standards. So based on the uses proposed, these projects will create the needed edge we need for Coachman Parks. Almost half of the 3.95 acres will be dedicated publicly accessible space for gathering and outdoor dining, and would be there for the owners to program to bring more activity. Based on the number of residential and hotel units, these projects will create eyes on the park. The careful designs will also ensure the scale of development does not overwhelm the park. And lastly, the 2 underground parking garages protect the park from the visual intrusions of cars and aid in limiting the building mass and height. To make this project successful, the proposed 30-year agreement sets forth a series of public and private obligations. So I'd just like to highlight a few of those. Of course, the agreement is going to include all the limitations about uses, density, intensity, and parking that we've already discussed, but the agreement will also prohibit some uses that are allowed in the downtown district, such as self-storage facilities, light assembly uses, and nightclubs unless it's located inside the hotel. There's some limits for amplified music that is being done through the establishment of decibel limits, and that would be consistent with background music. And it also requires the ingress and egress to publicly accessible areas to be dedicated to the general public. From the city's perspective, a key design consideration for the bluffs is to limit the visual and design implications of required parking. Therefore, the agreement provides for a city contribution to offset the cost of providing the parking underground. I do want to clarify, in the current draft, there is a reference to surface parking, and we need to clear that up because there's parking inside the garage at grade, and then there's also underground parking. There is really no true surface parking for these projects. There is a vehicular loading area on the City Hall site, and then when you access from the library site, there's some loading, but it's all undercover within the building. It may be at grade, not underground, but it is essentially concealed as much as you can, at least a loading space. There's also an Exhibit E that is attached to the agreement that outlines their sustainability and health and wellness initiatives, and I think that's the majority of them. There's one I think we ought to note, that the city is going to demolish the sites. We're going to make them development ready. We'll perform any sort of needed environmental remediation. And then the agreement also addresses how the city and the developers will show the cost of designing and constructing the pedestrian bridge that was part of their proposal in Coachman Park. And then lastly, the agreement lays out conditions that must be met by December 31st of 2024 in order for the developers to close on the property. And if those thresholds aren't met, the city can decide whether or not to terminate the agreement. And those conditions would be that the referendum, well, you pass the referendum ordinance, the referendum passes, they get their site plan approved, we get the preliminary plat approved, and they get building permits, and CRA has funding. I think that's it. So I think that gives you an overview of what is being proposed, and I'll defer to Mr. Margolis in case he would like to add anything, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Not at this time, but happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Jennings?
Yes, just to clarify on the demolition of the former City Hall site, that has been scheduled, and it will be fully demolished and site cleared by next March. And then we are moving forward on a phase 1 and a phase 2 environmental study, just to make sure that we have that information. So the city doesn't want to be an impediment to moving this project forward, so we've scheduled all of that work already.
Councilmember Albrecht?
Yeah, just a clarification on how is the underground parking accessed at the hotel? Is that from the library parking lot?
Yes, it is. I can go back. You can see right here, if you can see my cursor, right here.
Okay.
Yeah, so essentially there's shared access, and this is a representation of the layout. We don't know how we'll redesign our parking lot, but they will be able to access into the parking garage, and then this will be for back of house loading and all. So these will be at grade, but under the roof, under the building.
I got you. Thank you.
Other questions, Vice Mayor?
Was there anything about the timeline about building concurrently or anything like that in the?
Between the two sites, do you mean?
Between the two the two buildings, the two sites, but especially the two buildings on City Hall.
You mean the City Hall site?
Yeah.
On the City Hall, the way the agreement is currently drafted is that they would need to obtain building permits for the hotel, and then for the podium and one tower at City Hall by that December date that I gave you.
Okay.
I mean, we're going to dive deeper into the development agreement on Thursday.
This will be presented to CDB at their public hearing tomorrow, and we will report back to you their recommendations Thursday evening.
And that's why we're waiting. So, any other questions at this time? Thank you, Ms. Clayton. Appreciate it. 9.7.
Items 9.7 and 9.8 were withdrawn by the applicant.
Okay. 10.1.
Authorize the Marine and Aviation Director to apply for and administer the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission Sport Fishing Restoration Florida Boating Infrastructure Grants.
Mr. Gann?
Morning, Mayor, Council. Eric Gandy, Marine and Aviation Director. So part of the project for the beach marina rebuild involves the pursuit of some grants. FWC, Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, administers some of the grants for the federal government, and they require a resolution from council allowing me to apply for those grants and demonstrating a commitment to administer those grants for a period of 20 years. What this will do is allow us, as this project develops, if any new grants come online, the same resolution can be used to pursue those grants. Any grant that we actually end up pursuing would come before council again as far as the terms go. This merely allows me to fill out an application.
Any questions? Go get them.
Thank you.
11.1.
Authorize a purchase order to Alan J. for the purchase of 10 police pursuit vehicles.
Good morning, Dan Slaughter, Chief of Police. It's been widely publicized. Everybody's probably well aware of supply chain and production issues associated with vehicles. The Fleet Department had learned that Alan J. had 10 vehicles, police pursuit vehicles in inventory, and that they were available for purchase, and we are in need of purchasing these vehicles to meet our demands. The Fleet Department and the Police Department are seeking approval to purchase the 10 vehicles pursuant to the City Code Section 2.5631C, which is basically the piggyback provision, for an amount of $353,900. And the piggyback contract is the Sourcewell contract, and the number's listed in the agenda item. Additionally, the vendor that we have been using for the graphics on our police vehicles is no longer in business. And so we're also, to avoid delays with the production and completion of these vehicles, seeking approval to procure 5 of the vehicles with graphics from Alan J. for the total amount of $5,250. And that would be underneath the City Code Section 25631D, which is the provision for the impractical to bid. Additionally, or lastly, the Fleet and the Police Department are seeking an extension of the Enforcement 1 contract. That contract is the company that provides the upfitting with the emergency lights and emergency equipment for our vehicle. We are looking to avoid delays, of course, for the same reasons I mentioned previously with the graphics. This would extend the contract through October 31st of this year, and we would also increase the contract to $40,000, which will allow enough room financially for us to be able to upfit these vehicles. The $40,000 the police department has is currently in our operating budget. We're not asking for new funds for that. We currently have it. The Alan J. purchase of a total of $359,150, that would be funded or financed through the lease purchase program. We won't have to answer any questions, and Perry's from Fleet as well, if there's any questions for Perry.
And we have this under solid waste and general services because it's part of Fleet.
I think we both own it, and I think we do rock, scissors, paper every now and then. I lose.
Okay. Questions for the chief?
May I place it on consent, council?
Please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. 12.1.
Appoint Stephanie Chill to the Sister Cities Advisory Board as the Sister Cities, Inc. representative for an unexpired term through July 31st, 2023. Council members, Ms. Gardner has completed her term as the local chapter president, and therefore has also recommended Ms. Chill as the current chapter president to serve in that capacity.
Any questions? Ms. Chill is very dedicated. I went to their annual meeting out at Moccasin Lake Park, got to meet everybody and talk to them, so I think she'll be great. Plus, I love her last name.
Chill. Chill.
Yeah. Consent?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. 13.1.
Mayor, this is a request for authority to settle case of City of Clearwater v. 1510 Berry Holding LLC, case number 21-4847 CI. With Mayor's permission, I'd like Mr. Fuino to speak to this item.
Good afternoon, Council. Michael Fuino, Assistant City Attorney. This item recommends a request authority to settle a co-lien foreclosure. After the lawsuit was filed, the violator, it's a company named 1510 Barry Holdings, transferred and sold the property to a developer who intends to put a multifamily development on the property that includes an affordability component. But the developer took the title to the property subject to our lien, which in reality creates hindrances to construction. So the core terms to allow the construction to go forward and resolve the lawsuit will be a $50,000 payment from the developer to the city in a construction timeline, most of which will include a CO or a CTOC within 12 months and 90% occupancy within 18 months. If the developers also agree that if this timeline is not met, the city is entitled to a foreclosure judgment, the full amount of the lien. So we won't go and enforce it that way. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Questions for Mr. Fuino? Has this developer been in Clearwater before? Did they do an adjacent property?
Yes, he actually did that one, Technics on Jeffords.
Okay, which many of us went to the ribbon cutting on. So, no questions? All right, consent?
Yep.
13.2.
Call for an election on November 8th of 2022 to present a referendum question to the city electors amending the charter of the city to allow the redevelopment and sale of 2 certain unoccupied properties in the downtown core and pass ordinance 9597-22 on first reading. Council, this is the item that we've been discussing as far as the language for the referendum question. That referendum language is proposed by ordinance. Council settled on the language during the last meeting. And so the purpose for this week will be to bring it before council on first reading and to pass the ordinance on first reading. If council passes it on first reading this coming Thursday, that ordinance will come back before council on August 4th for a second reading, and that will be the latest possible date at which we can approve the agenda item if we still want to make the November ballot, which I assume that we do.
Any questions for Mr. Margolis? Okay. 13.3. Through 13.8 are all second and third readings. Any questions on those? All right, seeing none. 14.1.
Provide project update on the redevelopment of Cushman Park and Magic Clearwater.
Mayor and Council, Michael Delk will provide an update for you and the community as to where we are with the Magic.
Yes. Thank you, John. I'm going to introduce Tim Kurtz here, who will kick this item off, but in doing so, I want to say, first of all, that I appreciate the staff that Tim and Kat and engineering is doing. If there's anyone who you can ask virtually any question about the details and weeds of this $84 million project, the next 2 folks that'll be coming up here to provide you an update are the ones to ask. And I particularly want to call out Pete, who's done a great job for us as an owner rep to help coordinate between Skanska and Stantec with regard to this project on a virtually daily basis that he and staff are involved in this project. So he's been a big help to us. I think on the staff side, we certainly appreciate the contribution that Pete has made to this overall effort. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tim.
Good afternoon. Tim Kurtz from engineering. I think he stole my thunder, but basically the project is on budget and on time. Pete's in no small part helping with that. So
was money well spent?
So far, so good. Yes, sir. We're moving forward. Every request we've gotten, we've tried to accommodate. Some of them we're still working on, but we're moving forward. And we stopped digging almost, and that's been a problem because every time they put a shovel in the ground, we found unidentified items that have not the latest, but helped us spend some money. So it's good that we're going vertical. I hope y'all are watching the videos that are online. It's good to see it growing. So with that, I'll turn it over to Pete, and we'll be able to.
Good afternoon. It's a big, heavy introduction, Mayor Clear.
I don't think anyone can pronounce your last name, so.
I've noticed everybody. They stopped at Pete. So I have good news. The overall project completion is at 44%. So far to date, we spent $30.5 million from the $69 million that was approved as a GMP. We have 85% of the import fill delivered and placed on site. 85% of the underground utilities have been completed, and 95% of Duke Energy primary power work has been completed. 99% of the project has already been bought out in the market. There's just a small piece in awnings over the entrance of the part that needs to be finalized. The dock master and the IWF restroom buildings are 40% complete. The structural steel and the metal roof decking on those buildings will be installed in the next couple of weeks. The event restroom building is 70% complete. The foundations for the band shell building are 100% complete. We're starting now to put the slabs and to start the walls going forward. And all the underground utility work under the building, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing work has been completed under the band shell building. The foundations of the canopy as well are 100% complete. The anchor bolts for the canopy are in place, and the erection of the canopy structure will start the first week of August. Bird Air, the contractor, the subcontractor for the canopy, is mobilizing the last week of July. And then the Pierce Street west section of the parking lot by the causeway is underway, and we're now, I know that's an important point to you as to when we open it. So we're currently working out the turnover logistics and the time frame of where that parking lot can be put in use. The Plumar wall is 99% complete. What's left over will be completed as the hardscape work goes forward. And then the new sanitary force main that ties the existing city lift station 16 with the line under the water has been completed and is now being certified. So as both as it was said earlier, that the project is on schedule, remains within the $84 million approved budget. The total GMP value to date is $69,498,000, and it includes a $3.2 million contingency, owner contingency, and about $885,000 of that contingency has already been spent to cover unforeseen underground site conditions. And as the project progressed, 2 additional scope items were developed and were incorporated in the project because of the time frame on when they needed to be incorporated. The first one is a rain gutter system and the related underground piping that collects all the rainwater that comes off of the rain of the canopy structure and channels it through baffle boxes and cleans it and then puts it into the stormwater system. The total cost of that system, including tying it to the underground stormwater system, is $827,000. Then the second item that was additional scope is an enhanced AV system. The initial allowance for the AV system was $1 million in the GMP, and that primarily intended to cover all the infrastructure that was required for the AV system, with the intent that the rest of the system would be rented. As meetings took place following the GMP with various promoters, city staff, and others, the consultants, the equipment a decision was made to actually purchase most of the equipment, and additional equipment was added. So the total cost of the AV system, including the impact on the canopy structure, because the canopy structure had to be enhanced to be able to carry the system, and also the electrical system had to be upgraded. The total cost of that entire package is $2,533,000, or $1.5 million over the allowance. So those 2 items were additional scope to the project as the project progressed, and so the intent is to transfer through an administrative change order to transfer $2,361,637 back into the contingency of the project to replenish the contingency that was used to cover these two items because they had to be covered to maintain the schedule and maintain the flow of the construction for these two items. So this transfer does not exceed the $84 million project cost. But it is important to replenish the contingency. And as you know, we're now adding showers that were requested. We're adding fans and items like that. So we would need, in my opinion, we would need that contingency to be replenished back to its original condition so that so we had money to deal with these issues and not have to come back when decisions need to be made. We only have basically a year to go to finish this project, and that's the good news. Bad news is we have a year to go to do this. So everybody's working full speed ahead. As Tim said, the design team and the construction team are working well together. Everybody is committed to the project. So at this point, there's no cause for concern. And as you said earlier, we're maintaining the budget and we're maintaining the schedule. I'll be happy to answer any questions that I can.
Questions?
I've got some questions about some of those numbers and but I need some time to, first of all, this thing is frozen up. But,
Well, you want to deal with that? I've got a couple. So
Yeah.
Originally, we were told that the AV was better to have it rented because the technology changes. Oftentimes, the artists bring their own. Is this for lesser events?
This is actually a fairly elaborate AV system.
So where did this change come about? Even when we were talking about who we were selecting, we didn't talk, we were talking about renting.
Well, I wasn't involved in those negotiations, but I think our special events staff, working with our AV professional design consultant, and also in talking with the various groups that would potentially be putting on events here, they developed, I think it was over a 3-month period, back and forth talking about what they viewed as the necessities. So I don't think it includes some of the big things like the large monitors and that kind of thing, but it's a pretty inclusive package. And I'm not an expert in that, but I think Chris Cook was involved in it, and I believe Ruth Eckert was involved in some of the negotiations and discussions of what would be the minimum, as well as Live Nation and some of the others. So this is what it developed to. We did have money in the budget, and I would just touch on that when we first brought the overall project in, we had some non-GMP allocations that we put in there because we just didn't know what they cost at that time. A lot of those have come in less than we expected. There's been significant cost savings by going ahead and purchasing a lot of things at 99%. And we also had just some allocations in there for unforeseens with utilities and other systems that we haven't had to spend. And the reason we want to regroup, those funds are in the budget. We want to put those in contingency, as he mentioned, because I don't know what we could encounter going forward, but we won't have the contingency there so that we're not having to stop, which is what would happen, and come back to council and do it at that time. So,
And if the contingency isn't used at the end of the project, it
absolutely,
comes back
that
to
is our
us.
goal.
I understand all that.
But it's still, we're watching it. Thanks to Pete, we've really honed in on that. We're in good shape. I mean, we barred against unused allowances, both the GMP allowances, because they just had earmarks and stuff. But they worked with him, and I think we've done a good job keeping it under.
And now that we're above ground, the surprises should lessen.
With the exception of acts of God, major storms, that kind of thing. But even then, there's insurance, but you still got to finish and then recoup from insurance and that kind of thing. So we're just hopeful that we don't need it, but don't want to get in a position where we do and don't have it.
I mean, the gutter system seems like a no-brainer. We need to do that.
Right.
I'd like to get a little more information on the AV. Councilmember Albritton.
Yeah, I think it's real important that we do this right. We don't open and then find out that, I was glad to see that you've caught the shower thing in the green room as a necessity instead of later having them coming back and saying, we need to put those in.
Well, we do have showers, they would have, they're communal, if you will, and that all the talent would be using the same shower facility. I'm sure security could be worked out, but if we want a shower, we're going to add it. And we're working with our consultants now to see what that's going to take, both permitting wise as well as
Well, just because you're thinking of all the little detail stuff now, and we've got a year to go, that's a good thing.
To make sure that as issues like that come up, we don't have to spend the time to come back and,
Right.
Deal with each one at a time. I think decisions that are being made on the project are wise decisions, and they're, and we're being careful with the money, but these are additional scope items that need to exist. So we get value for those items. They're not capricious items.
Well, I fully support the fans. I mean, they have them over in Tampa and at other facilities, the airport.
Mayor, the issue with issues like that is just that we have to be very careful of how we add them, so we don't either delay the project or add additional costs to structure, for instance, to support the fans. So the decision of how big they are is one that needs to be made on the weight and how the weight is carried by the existing structure. As I said, the structure is starting to go up at the beginning of August, so that structure is made, so we can't go back and remake it. So we have to figure out how we attach these, and then we have to figure out how they interfere with the current lighting layout, so that we don't create a strobe effect with these fans. So again, all these decisions are made carefully as the need arises. We're careful both about the money and also the impact on the existing decisions, the current decision.
Can you help me with why Stan Tech wouldn't have included those in the first place?
Fans?
Yes.
I don't know how to, not having been there at the beginning, I don't know how to answer that question.
There's still a fair amount of debate about how effective they'll be. I do get that they move a large volume at very low speed, so you don't feel it blowing on you. But the other issue is the noise. Do we want to do a whole new sound study to figure out if the AV's right? I don't think it's going to be a problem the way we're approaching it. And they agree. And speaking of the AV, I think part of the cost that's stunning to me is that when you have an outdoor event in a marine environment, you're not just buying normal speaker systems. It's all got to be salt resistant. So the prices are, you see these kind of systems on cruise ships.
It's not just the speakers.
It's the wiring, it's the components, the monitors.
It's a very corrosive environment.
Yeah.
Well, and then the structure, as I said, had to be upgraded because these are big, they're big sails. So you have to keep them.
So that AV cost includes the structural modifications as well.
So that's where the impact came from.
Mr. Jennings, do you have anything to add?
Not at this time.
All right.
I had a couple, my
Go ahead.
computer's moving now.
Okay.
This, maybe I can reach out to you with some specifics. Like you said, 99% of some wall, I didn't get what wall was complete.
I'm sorry, that's Colmar.
Oh, the Clearwater wall.
Clearwater?
That's the wall, the resiliency wall that we put in for the,
It's around the band shell building as well as the Dock Masters building, and it mitigates for flood damage in the event we have a storm.
Okay.
And it mitigated the flood elevation. We had to build those finished floors too.
I think-
So it's more resiliency and sustainability.
Kat showed us that. So I think, one thing I think about is, the enhanced AV system, these enhanced showers and all that. Those are are some things that I understand you're probably talking with Ruth Eckert Hall and staff about what's appropriate, but, you know, I wonder about when we were considering our agreement, you know, some others were gonna put like $5 million into enhancements. Would these be some of the examples of the enhancements that others might do that we weren't aware of, that this is what artists want, or this is the demand?
I can't speak to what they were talking about, but I would imagine so. You know, retrofitting and adding a restroom is, or showers, gets complicated. If we created a separate room with a separate shower, you're increasing floor drains, that changes your DEP permit. Believe it or not, just 2 extra drains would change that permit. Plus, we still are using our consultants to talk about what the change in the permitting just with the city is. It's been an extensive effort because the set of plans is this thick. So just to do a plan amendment, we had to break every structure into its own permit, which was not originally budgeted, but it's working out. But just coming in with the reports it takes to answer simple questions without affecting every building, those reports are very specific and a lot of dialogue going on.
And so the intent is to transfer over $2 million back into the contingency of this project so that you can pay for other unforeseen things later on?
Should they arise.
And how much did we allocate for all contingencies?
3284.
How much?
$3,284,530.
So we're gonna spend all of it?
No, we've spent a lot on underground unforeseens that we have encountered, rerouting utilities.
Right.
Because we weren't sure they were right where they were. We did an exhaustive amount of sewer work or underground investigation, but you're following the pipe and it takes off at a 45 that nobody knew about. We're dealing with a water line right now, an 8-inch water line under the interactive water feature. It was put in the 40s, it's cast iron, nobody wants to touch it, but, you know, we're working through it.
Have we run out of our contingency funds?
No, not all, not absolutely, but
Okay.
it's getting low.
We just need to replenish it.
Not to the point where it's gonna stop any efforts, but we don't wanna get to that point.
And then you said, are you getting ready to put the canopies on?
Structure starting.
The structural
So
steels.
for this, the steel, but not the color
No.
or the? Okay,
Not the
I was
color.
thinking with hurricane season, are you gonna put those things up?
No,
and
it's
we're not
designed
even
to
using
150
it?
mile an
I
hour
hope it
winds, but
stays
it's
in
not going to.
hurricane.
Yeah, well, yeah,
But no, the cover won't go on for quite a while.
like next spring or something.
It'll be in for June, more or less.
Okay. Thanks. It's exciting.
So will we fund this on Thursday, or is there going to be another item that will be coming forward?
Does not need to come back. This is just an update for you.
It's just an update.
Okay,
It's an internal
It's within
transfer.
administrative authority.
all right. Just want to make sure. I do have one question, Tim, that's a little off the wall. So I was sitting on the balcony of somebody's condo at Water's Edge the other day and looking at the property west and below what we call the CMA property on Pierce.
Yes.
Who owns that?
At the very bottom of the bluff,
At the very bottom of the bluff, due west of the CMA property.
right, so you
With a
have
lift station.
there's a lift station 16 is there.
Right.
Yeah.
The city does own that property, and currently they're under design to do a refurbished
Lift station.
lift station.
Right.
And we have run a larger force main under the park that will be tying into that. So that's under design right now.
But it's a fairly decent little piece of property.
Just enough for a driveway. The slopes are a little deceiving in there to try, we had originally thought of having green space parking off of it during event. I wouldn't even say events. Say if you had a contractor working down there, rather than having tie up parking spaces, he could pull his equipment in there as a staging area, if you will. There's also what Michael refers to as the bunker buried in the hills. It's an old power plant that was part of a previous development there. The city does own that, and I think that's left out of the development parcel. But
I
Grade-wise,
just
it's a
wondered if we
challenge.
could get additional parking there. That's really where I was going.
How many spaces are in that parking lot, Pierce Street lot? It's pretty good size, 280 something.
It's a lot of spaces, but I can't remember the exact number.
I don't know that it's gonna be, for what you put into it, you'd get a lot of use out of it, but, and again,
Okay.
the slopes, you'd have to do a lot of retaining walls and
Right.
make it flush.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Margolis?
Just two things briefly. Number one, when council selected Gotham and D'Annunzio on June 16th to begin those negotiations, I promised to work day and night to make this happen in order to make the November ballot. I've definitely kept that promise, but the reason I say that is to lead into something else, which is that I wanted to recognize city staff, because this would not be possible without tremendous effort from staff. So I wanted to publicly say thank you to Ms. Kivett, especially to Ms. Clayton, for having really put in a lot of extra hours and helping us get through this, and for my own staff, to Matthew Middich from my office, who's been instrumental in helping it along. So just wanted to say thank you for all of them. And the second thing is just with our police recruits. I've spent a lot of my career advising law enforcement, and it's always a joy to watch new officers join the agency, including a legacy. And so I just wanted to say congratulations to them, and I hope they have a great future here in Clearwater.
Well, thank you for all the work you've been putting in. I know it's been overtime and a lot of back and forth and creative problem solving, and so I don't want that to be overlooked either. Mr. Jennings, anything?
No, sir.
You sure?
I am positive.
Okay. Any new business for future agendas? Councilmember Beck.
I have some. So I was fortunate to go out with a turtle patrol last week. I don't know if you all did. Did you do that?
I did.
It was great. So we, went out a half hour before sunrise and really talked about lighting. We started at the Palm Pavilion and we went north. But anyway, I want to talk about a true turtle lighting ordinance. And one thing that was brought to my attention, I do have photos that I can share with you all, is our lifeguard main station down there is like a beacon. It is lit a lot. I mean, it stands out a lot, and it's problematic for our turtles during turtle nesting season. Thinking about maybe having a discussion if we can do better there. I also was very fortunate because I got to go to the Hidalgonese culture end of camp celebration because Mayor Hibbard wasn't feeling well, so it worked out well. And I'm glad you're feeling better. But anyway, it was a wonderful celebration of the Hidalgonese culture, and I learned, and it was like 4 hours long, dance, food, arts, crafts, music. And we have about 30,000 Hidalgonese in this area, in our region. And in talking to these leaders, they're interested, and I guess they've been in discussions about forming a sister city relationship with Clearwater. So I'd like to learn more about what that entails, how we can go about it, and what we need to consider. So I'd like to talk about that in the
We've been
future.
working on it. I've already met with their delegation. Ichimipan, I believe, is the city.
Okay.
Their mayor came into town.
Great.
And we met. Christopher Hubbard is looking at all of the requirements, and then also we'll go to the Sister City Advisory Board too. I did talk to them about it at their annual meeting, just to make them aware that it would come to them. Do you have something to add, Mr.
I
Maxwell?
just wanted to make note that it is under consideration this week at the Sister Cities
Oh, great.
board meeting, so they're going to be discussing it this week.
Okay, fantastic. That'll be great. It'd be good to learn that. I did want to make you aware again of that, the invitation to city leadership and electeds for the Suncoast League of Cities candidate, kind of roundtable speed dating thing on Monday, July 25th at 5:30 Pinellas Park. And then, I think that's about it. I talked to you earlier a little bit about the Suncoast League of Cities. We're discussing some of our priorities to advocate for next session, but it's a later session because of the election of the governor. And so, we have some time to talk about what that might be. But one thing in my work with the COC is we're transitioning to this 988 National Suicide Hotline, which is fantastic. But the intent is to have much more mental health resources available for people who call, not just with a suicide crisis, but kind of a mental health crisis. And the federal government is getting it started, but we need to get state funding. And one idea is to tack on a tax to telecommunications, like a penny to your cell phone bill or 5 cents to your cell phone bill to help pay for this. So it's just something to have on our radar as we go forward. And that's all.
Very good. Anything else? All right, we'll see everybody on Thursday. We're adjourned.